Mhm. Just give it a couple minutes here. I'm starting late, so I don't know if anyone will show up today or not. Check, check, check. So I'll start in a minute here. Hey, what's up, all? Just give me a second. Sorry I'm starting late today. Okay, I will start today. Can everyone hear me? I'm having internet problems. I live in the boonies, so sometimes this stuff happens when it gets. Okay, good deal. If it gets particularly windy, sometimes I have days where my power will go in and out, and then that affects my internet connection. So we'll give it a go. So yeah, the reason I'm little. All right, thanks, guys. The reason I'm a little late is I had a work thing, and it's neither here nor there. I work in home healthcare. I had to go out just to training how to use like kind of a new system we have. And it's one of those deals. I'm sure anyone who has a work situation where they have trainings have dealt with something like this. There's like 12 of us. We're sitting in a room, and 40 minutes goes by, and the person that's supposed to be doing the training's not there yet. So we finally go out and we like get someone higher up in the office. And it turns out that there was like some kind of medical emergency, but no one checked the trainer's schedule to see if they had any trainings that particular day. So there we were running 40 minutes late. So I'm vastly unprepared for this live stream, though I advertised it would be at 1:30. And also my wife will beat me to death if I don't continue to stir the soup she has cooking in the crock pot. So I'll have to get up every half hour to stir soup while I'm doing this. So I may come off as a little disheveled. So I don't know where to start today. I have like updates on me running for Congress that I could start with, or I could start with actual policy. I think I'll start with actual policy stuff. So if you just give me a quick second here. I want to bring up the actual text of the Green New Deal because it's worth talking about. Now, far be it from me to brag about myself, but here goes. I covered this January 3rd. And it's funny how even like a lot of the mainstream like political pundits, whether you're like talking about like newspapers or magazines or like CNN, Fox News, or even like content providers on like YouTube and stuff like Ben Shapiro, a lot of them just kind of like, it's like they don't go through these bills line by line, and instead they just kind of talk about what everyone else is talking about. So they released what basically is the entire shell of this January 3rd. And I did a video back on January 3rd, which I thought was kind of amazing that like everyone was just kind of like, oh yeah, the Green New Deal, it looks stupid. It'd be undoable. But my video, I think I titled it that it was Orwellian and Draconian. And it was crazy because I was looking at the text of this deal, and it was unbelievable to me the amount of government control it would give over pretty much every area of your life. And that it reached into areas that had nothing to do with environmentalism, which kind of gives away what the agenda is, right? It's not just about the environment. It's about having socialism. It's about having government control over your life. They don't want to come right out and say that, though, so they need some kind of fear-mongering. Now, fear-mongering's been used by both parties, and even before the creation of the United States, politically, to be able to push agendas. We used to see it with things like war. And I would argue, I know it as a Republican, some people, this might shock, but I originally, like, my first foray into politics was after 9/11. I was a high school senior when 9/11 occurred. But after that, then you get into the Afghanistan and the Iraq War. And the Iraq War was the first thing where I was really like, wait, what? What does, not that Saddam was a good guy, but what does he have to do with the 9/11 attacks? He's not on good foot with someone like Osama bin Laden. None of the hijackers from Iraq. They're all from Saudi Arabia, and they were following orders from bin Laden, who was in Afghanistan. So the question was like, what's going on? And it seemed to me that Iraq and overthrowing Iraq had to do with kind of the military industrial complex and what the establishment wanted as part of their agenda, whether it be for wealth, whether it be for defense spending and things like that. And so the idea of fear mongering of, oh, we have to go in there or something bad will happen. And we see this throughout history. War was often used as this country's so bad, we have to get them. We saw it with Libya. We see it today with Syria. The problem is that story's kind of getting old, and it becomes more difficult to tell in a world where we're so interconnected. So think about this. If you exist in a time like, before telecommunications, where you're basically people, many people couldn't even read. So where are you getting your news? Word of mouth. Or if you could read, you're getting it from newspapers, but they're all, it's very difficult if you're in England to get France's side of the story. Nowadays, let's say England and France would go to war like back in the day. Like you would be able to actually talk to French people live and see kind of what's going on. So it enables you to get more of a story. It makes this type of propaganda more difficult. Now, not impossible. It still happens. We still see it in situations like Syria, but it makes it more difficult. And so people are wising up. It's harder to get public support for ridiculous increased government controls over people's lives without as much of a pushback. And that's what we see kind of with the Patriot Act. We saw with Edward Snowden releasing information. That was all designed on the fear of the terrorist. We have to stop the terrorist, or we have to stop some war. Well, I think that the establishment left and the establishment right would go along with this also. They found a far better fear-mongering tactic, and that is that of climate change. It's something that the average person, you have no way of knowing. It's out there in the future, and there's this kind of consensus that the climate is changing, and it's easy to be scared from it. Now, I'm old enough to remember, like, in the little town I grew up in, like, there was a terrible flood in 96. We had some crazy blizzards and things like that. And it's easy during that moment to be like, holy cow, this is the worst it's ever been. And sometimes it is the worst it's ever been. But even that was before this climate change alarmism we see now. And I'm not saying that some of that's not rooted in truth, but I'm just saying even then, before the Al Gores of the world and stuff, it was easy to get frightened and be like, wow, look at how bad these weather patterns are. Or, Hurricane Andrew, I think, was 92. But if you lived through any of those terrible hurricanes, even before this, the recent push for the past 15 years for, climate change and Al Gore and all this, where it's going to wipe us all out, it was easy to see that would frighten people. And we just don't know. And if you look into history back in the 70s, they thought that global cooling was the problem. And there were all kinds of papers written that was, oh my goodness, in the next 10 to 20 years, cooling's going to be such a big problem. Then it became warming. Now it's climate change, and they're still talking about warming. Anyways, the point I bring up is this. It's not that the veracity of what these people are saying isn't true. I think the climate is changing. I've talked about this often. There is a consensus. I will go so far as to say there's a consensus in these two areas. There is a consensus that the climate is changing, and I would also say, by consensus, I don't mean 100%. Clearly, there'll be people, but I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt that there's also a consensus that humans affect that climate change. Now, the question is, that's where the consensus ends, though, because then there's all kinds of reasonable scientists that could disagree on how much do humans cause that change, how much change will there be, how bad will that change be for the environment overall, how bad will that change be for humanity in general, what specific areas will be affected, what specific global ocean rise can we see, how long will it take for that to happen, what will the catastrophe be in terms of like human lives and the way humans live, how long will that take to happen? I think I maybe already said that. What can we do to solve this? Is it even possible for us to turn back the clock now? Things like that. What would the attempts at solving this, what would the cost of that be and other disasters? These are all nuanced, reasonable questions. And oftentimes it wants to just get wrote off as climate denier, science denier. Don't listen to them. But no, these are very specific questions that we need to be asking. We have to do a cost-benefit analysis. How bad can things get? And like when we used to do, I don't know if anyone's watching that was in policy debate with me, but you would call this like impact analysis. You would say, oftentimes there's two things. So when we were doing impact analysis, let's say, Team A says, if we don't pass this bill, there'll be a war in the South China Sea. That's what the one side says. And the other side says, yeah, but if you do pass that bill, then it'll lead to a collapsed economy in the United States, which could lead to a resource war. And so you start to look at things like, what is the time frame for these impacts happening? What is the probability for these impacts happening? What is the magnitude of the impacts? If this impact happens, how does it affect the rest of the things in the earth? And those were kind of the four areas you looked at. So just because something's a catastrophic impact, like you might say an asteroid could hit the earth, and so therefore we need to, spend $100 billion developing asteroid defense. The magnitude's huge, the end of the earth, but what is the probability? Well, maybe really low. What is the time frame? Well, maybe thousands of years. But the solution, the problems it arises for, the magnitude might not be high. It's just that, we'd have to stop like the SNAP program or food stamps program or something to get that $100 billion. Clearly, I'm oversimplifying. So the magnitude's lower, but the probability and the time frame is much higher. And so you have to make some kind of analysis. Now, this seems to be, yes, this seems to be it seems confusing and all, but it's really very simple. It's just anytime you're doing something, like you could look at it in your everyday life, right? Like, geez, your vehicle's not safe, so you need to buy a new car, to get new tires on your car to travel around in the winter roads. But the cost of those tires will take away from something else. So you weigh the cost benefit analysis. I really need the tires, but the impact of that is then I'm not going to be able to get that new insulation I needed for my house. So what are the costs? You do an impact analysis, you analyze, and we're avoiding that conversation. We're just talking about, it's this idea of claiming this moral high ground. And you can see this being used often. I'm biased, so I think more so by the Democrats and many people on the left, but you see the right do this as well. And it's one of the things I don't like, where you see this drive to emotion, like, immigration's a good issue where this occurs, where Nancy Pelosi's talking in tense of morality. The wall is immoral. It's obviously garbage. She's voted for the wall in the past. But you'll see, like, the Democrats will bring some dreamer up and be like, this dreamer is amazing, fought in the military, Rhodes Scholar, this proves that, illegal immigration isn't that bad. And then the Republicans will be like, here's an angel mom whose son was killed by a dreamer. Like, both of those stories can be true simultaneously, but they're trying to drive on your emotion. And particularly when we're talking about massive government policy, we should, you look at the stories, you look at those anecdotal stories, but you have to look at the greater picture, and you shouldn't be driven by purely emotion. And so this is all wordy way of saying, we get to this Green New Deal, which is laughable. I mean, it's honestly laughable. It is, if you know nothing, if you don't know anything about how budgets work, or you don't know anything about green technology or the energy industry or anything, and you have someone start to read this deal to you, you would just be like, what? I mean, it literally sounds like something out of the Wizard of Oz or something. Like, we're just going to power everything on magic, basically. I mean, it's absolutely insane, but it makes perfect sense to Ocasio-Cortez. And the reason is, you heard her recently say, and I kind of talked about this when it happened, she said, we're all done in 12 years if we don't start making changes. And I was like, look, there's danger in that statement. Once you get so hyperbolic, because I think she believes that. Now, I know and hammered down, does she mean literally, we are literally dead in 12 years, the entire world, if nothing happens? Or does she mean, if we don't change anything within 12 years, then that's it? Eventually, we'll all be dead. It'll be too late to do anything then. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say it's the second, though I'm not so sure. But let's say that. Let's say that's what she was going with. The problem is, if you believe that, what are you willing to do? What rights are you willing to take from people? How much power are you willing to give the government to solve that? You're literally talking about the end of the world. And this is the same argument I made with the punch Nazis. Is it okay to punch Nazis? And I was like, this is terrible. This sort of political violence is not justified. You're only justified when acting in direct self-defense to be able to use violence. Because predictably, what I said back then, and many other people said, it's not like I'm clairvoyant. This stuff's easy to predict. Was as soon as you say that, right? Because as soon as you're like, okay, there are some instances where it's okay to punch Nazis, and then you say the president's a Nazi and his supporters are Nazis, what do you think is going to happen? And it is a mainstream political belief of the mainstream media that you often hear saying, Trump is a racist, Trump is a dictator, Trump is a Nazi, he's like Hitler. Well, if you're someone at home and you're taking that seriously, what do? Well, you do like the guy that shot Steve Scalise did. You think you're a hero because you need to stop the Nazis. Now take that same issue with climate change. You legitimately feel in 12 years we're all done. You feel that way. And you believe that much, so much, you're not even willing to have the debate. Like, wait, where's the science saying that? Okay, you're taking this one report, but like it says that oceans may rise, like temperatures might rise a degree in the next 100 years. So oceans may rise a couple feet. And yes, that would be bad. There would be a lot of troubles on the coastal, but what are the chances of that actually happening in that 100-year period? What are the technological advances that will naturally occur that would be able to buttress against that? Will we be able to put levees and things like that could buttress against? Who knows? There's all kinds of conversations we can have to that. But she's unwilling to have any of them. It's just, no, we are all dead. And so the plan is predictable then, because the plan is we need massive government control. It's almost like martial law for the country, right? Except it's not martial law to keep the peace from like conflict. It's martial law to save us from climate change. And as a result of that, sorry, Pat, that'll never happen. They will never admit they're wrong. You can see it with socialism. How many times does socialism fail and they keep saying, no. You expect to be like, okay, finally, all the socialists said Venezuela. Bernie stood up and said, yep, Venezuela. That's when Chavez was there. That's the place. What a successful country. The U.S. should be more like Venezuela, they said. Then when Venezuela collapses, they're like, well, it wasn't socialism's fault. And it's like, okay, can you name one socialist country ever that did well? Nah, they just didn't do it right. It'll be the same with climate change. If they're proved wrong, if these predictions don't come out, it'll just be like, oh, on to the next prediction. Who cares? It's very similar. I mean, honest to goodness, it is like a sense of religiosity. I believe something so strongly that I'm unwilling, any evidence that comes about to disprove that, I refuse to debate. I'll just say it's not science. And I feel that that is the most important thing in the world. It is very similar to, you remember, like back in not just the Aztec calendar, like 2012 people, but you don't buy into my hatred of sages. Well, you should. Anyways, you remember back in the day, you had all these preachers that were like, oh man, I received a vision, the revelations will occur, June 13th, 1999. And then that date would come and you'd be like, okay, surely this preacher that said that has lost all of his, patrons. And he would just be like, oh no, and you know what? Actually, we've been given a reprieve by God. It's going to be 4 more years. That's it. They just keep going. That's the same way this climate change business will be. And so when you look at the plan, you're like, okay, well, if that's true, like the first question, so it makes sense as to why it's so incredible. And if you haven't got a chance to look at it, I'm not going to go through it line by line. I already did a whole video where I talked about it, but like it says things like, we will change the infrastructure of the entire country. There will no longer be fossil fuels after 10 years. We'll be greenhouse gas emission neutral. We'll have to do things like there will not be airplane travel. There will not be cows having flatulence. Like we'll transition away from all that. Instead of airplanes, we'll have high-speed rail. Basically, there will be electric charging stations for vehicles like every block. Each house will be revamped for energy and comfort, which means the federal government has to guarantee that, right? So they would have to come into every house and do this. We need 100% clean energy that doesn't have these emissions. The only energy we have that even has remotely a chance right now of doing that's nuclear energy, which is barred in the Green New Deal. Yeah, see, which it's barred in the Green New Deal. And so you're like, well, how is any of this possible? And it's in a time frame of 10 years, by the way. This all has to occur within 10 years. Well, let me see what you're writing here. Well, yes, you're right, Nate. There are general predictions that say that this stuff could happen. But to say, if your position on anything is, I believe this so strongly that I'm unwilling to debate evidence, nothing can change my mind, then that's a religious belief. And that's how some people approach climate change. Now, there are very credible people that say it's a serious problem, we need to take steps, but they're willing to hear alternative statistics and things like that. They're willing to say, okay, we had to readjust our model, it was wrong. Cortez says, we're dead in 12 years, there is no debate, and we need to have the government take massive control over all of our lives because of it. That's what I'm saying is like a religious sense. Not a person like you that might say, I take climate change very seriously because I've looked at the numbers and I think that it could be a bad thing, so we need to start working to alleviate some of that pressure. That's a totally different mentality. You're not out there saying, oh, well, and by the way, that means that we have to eliminate fossil fuels in 10 years. We have to end the, airplane travel. We have to take away cows that are being farmed because, like, that's when it gets to be kind of like this cult-like idea, this religious type idea, especially because another way, like one of the things you saw with religion, oftentimes the people that preach about the greatest sins in a religious sense are actually committing those sins themselves. So you see these people that are pushing the Green New Deal that actually have more effect on, have more of a footprint. What's the word they always use? You know what I'm talking about, though. They have more negative effect on the environment by flying around on private air jets, owning multiple homes, owning multiple vehicles, etc., than the average person that's taking public transportation or owns one home and a vehicle, etc. So it becomes this kind of religion. Yeah, carbon footprint, that was the word. But it becomes this kind of religious mentality then where, like, you could buy indulgences, like the cap and trade argument. I'm not saying this is the average opinion of the average Democrat or the average person concerned with climate change. As I said, clearly the climate's changing. Clearly humans have an effect on it. And clearly that has repercussions, or that those repercussions will affect both the environment and humans. The question is how much, what can we talk, etc., or what can we do to solve it, etc. So when you're unwilling to have that come and you just say, no, it is settled science, we won't talk about anything more, we're all dead in 12 years, like, that's not settled science. No one's saying that. Like, there are a couple people, there are some studies that say things like that. There are studies all over the place. Like, there are a lot of, like, when everyone says there's a consensus on scientists, like, there are a lot of scientists that say it's too late, we're screwed. Nothing we could do could save us. We're only putting off the inevitable. If we totally get rid of fossil fuels right now, we could buy ourselves an extra 50 years. There's scientists that say that. But if to just say, and I believe that, and I'm unwilling to look at any other evidence or any other scientists, like, that's crazy. That's as bad as the people that are on the other side that are just like, nothing any scientist can tell me it will convince me that the climate is changing or that humans have a part in it. That's nuts. The people that say that, we're like, that's like cult-like. You're unwilling. You have such great faith in your narrative that you're unwilling to change it. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking, it's not like religion in the sense that religion requires faith in things that we can't prove. Like, so we can't prove the existence of God, so that there's some kind of faith in it. I'm saying that when you are unwilling to look at other study, or when you say the debate is closed, and I don't mean the debate that the climate is changing or that humans have an effect, but the debate is closed. This is the timeline when we'll all die, and we need to enact these policies, and I'm unwilling to debate about it. That's when you get this kind of, that's all based on faith. That's not based on logic. It's rooted in a study you saw, but the unwillingness to look at things that could, real facts and statistics that could buttress against that study, that's what makes it religious-like. So anyways, if you truly believe that, if you believe that the world was going to end in 12 years, then you would say, yeah, some drastic measures just need to be taken. Just like average people like me and you would never be for martial law. But if it was so bad that we saw, like, there's 20 murders a day in a particular city or town that you live in, and it's just lawlessness, people breaking into buildings and firebombing buildings, then you would say, even though I'm someone who is errs on the side of freedom and personal liberty, clearly we need to take drastic measures to have law enforcement clean this up. And that's how you get the idea of martial law. That's the effect what we're seeing, except with climate change, right? And I'll get to that in a second, Nate. And so that's what are you willing to do then to save this? And so if you truly believe that we're dead in 12 years, it is a worthwhile exchange to say people can no longer drive vehicles. There's literally 10 years from now, there is no more gasoline. Period. End of story. There will be no more coal-fired power plants. Period. End of story. No more nuclear plants. Period. And that would seem reasonable to you. You would say the government will take control of the industry, and she says things like that. You would say, well, wait, how do we pay for that? It doesn't matter. It is such an earth-shattering catastrophe. We need to do this now. We have 10 years. Do it now, or we're all dead. And you would justify all kinds of you. What happens when people say, I'm not giving up my car? I don't want to change this. I'm going to fight for my rights to keep this stuff. I'm going to fight for my rights to not, have to go under this new paradigm to have the state own things. Well, then what do? The people that get in your way. It's to save the world, right? Maybe you jail them. This sounds very familiar. It's almost like this has happened in the past. Oh, that's right. It has. In Stalin's regime, in Mao's regime. See, everyone has this oversimplistic view of the world, I think, where it's like all these dictators were just evil from the get-go. Which this is kind of an aside, even if you don't agree with this, you might find it funny. A good friend of mine showed me one. Did you ever look up pictures of a young Stalin? He's quite the handsome gentleman. It's very unnerving. Young Stalin looks like he'd be quite the ladies' man. He's just pretty suave looking. But, I don't think Stalin comes into power thinking I'm going to be a brutal dictator that doesn't trust anyone, that kills my advisors that I think might be getting too influential, that, leads to tens of millions of people starving to death in the Ukraine, that leads to the murder of my own people and the placing them in gulags. Each step was an increment into leading to that. He thought that his country and the world was in a catastrophe and that his leadership would be able to solve it. And so each impediment along the way was just a slighter step towards the crazy dictatorship that he became that was murderous, which was, oh, okay, here's something in my way. I'll get rid of it in the most gentle way. Oh, that didn't end it. Well, then we'll be a little more harsh with it. Oh, that didn't end it. Then we'll be way more harsh with it. Until the end of the day, you're literally killing people. You're killing the kulaks. They had to put signs up in the Soviet Union that said, remember, no matter how hungry you get, you can't eat your children. That stuff exists. That really happened. It didn't happen overnight. And how does humanity allow itself to get there? How does a person or a country get there? Well, it starts off with a proposition. We are all doomed unless X. And so then you do X. And when something tries to stop you from doing X, you have to get that something out of the way. That's why this language is very, very, very dangerous, even if you believe in climate change. And you need to only look at this bill. Take the scariness out of it. It is laughable on face value. There is no way possible we could have this entire infrastructure renewal in 10 years. That's just with the energy stuff. Now, even at that, you could say, okay, well, you can't blame Cortez because let me address the argument you're talking about here, Nate, that she's starting from an extreme in order to compromise. That's ridiculous. That's not how this stuff works. You don't start at the extreme, say, we will take everything. Then how about this extreme? Rand Paul stands up and goes, no more government ever, eliminate it all, kick every illegal out, jail everyone who ever, commits any minor offense forever. Or no jails. How about that? If you're kicking every government out, anarchist. No one would be like, oh, shrewd move, Rand Paul, starting from an extreme so you could compromise to the middle. You'd be like, that's insane. No, it's not even in the realm of believability. You started at an extreme. It's something that the way you negotiate is you don't negotiate by starting at a position that you literally don't want, that's further extreme that you want, and then compromise to something that you actually want. That's not good negotiating. Now, I know the idea is people say, but you want to start from a strong position and then it gives you wiggle room to compromise. But even that, you never start from a position you don't believe in, because what if your opponent say, oh, okay, you're right. And then you're like, whoa, I went too far. See, no matter what, your starting position is something you would want. Let me give you an example. I had a house. I bought this house for $6,000 because it was a pile of garbage. And I ended up putting a $6,000 roof on it, blah, blah, blah. I had all these problems and I won't get into, but I put some money into the house. Then I ended up trying to sell the house. I figured I'd get $10,000 out of the house. Now, if I wanted $10,000, I perhaps would have been like, you know what? I'll put it up for $15,000 or $20,000. And then someone would come in and be like, I'll give you $7,000 for it. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we go to 10? And then I have a chance, that's how a compromise would work. What wouldn't work is me being like, you know what? I have this house. I'd like to get 10,000 out of it. I'll put it up for $1 billion. People are just going to be like, what? This is so outside the realm of anything remotely possible. It's so outside the realm of reality. We can't even have this discussion. And Nate, if you think, like, if you are someone who's concerned about climate change, or you're someone who's a Democrat, anyone who might be watching this, you ought to be very frightened. Not only that she put this forward, but that you had almost all of the major presidential people that have announced from the Democratic side saying, yes, this is a good step. This is good. Because it's a freaking joke. And when the average person, look, here's the deal, right? Like, I support Trump and I support a lot of what he does. But anyone who's watched my channel knows that the reason I support him is because I thought that he outed the corruption between the establishment parties, the Republicans and Democrats, and how at the top level, they're basically the same party. They believe in things like regime change wars, bailing out banks, Federal Reserve policy, things like that. And us as the individual constituents end up voting for groups of people, regardless of what our differences might be, and we get a bunch of people that really don't give a crap about us at the highest level. I'm not talking about you and me, the individual voter. I'm not talking about the person at the local level that runs as a Republican or Democrat. I don't even mean every Republican and Democrat in the Congress and Senate. I mean the true movers and shakers that are controlling the parties. Bernie and Trump were both seen as opposition, potential outsiders to that. Now, you might say Trump isn't an outsider. That's fine. I'm not getting into that debate right now. I'm just saying they were potential outsiders. And I wanted a Bernie versus Trump election because to me it would have driven them mad, and we saw that's exactly what happened. Regardless of the skill of Bernie or Trump, both of them had outed the establishment as being willing to do anything to take them down. Bernie, in his case, by the Democrats totally screwing him in the primary, and Trump by all the crazy spying on him by the intel community, Chuck Schumer admitting that the intel community was going to come after him, all the corruption we see in the Mueller investigation, etc. The constant bad press that's just a mouth. The press has been outed more than ever to the common person that they literally aren't journalists. 90% of them now are just mouthpieces for the establishment Democratic Party. That's why I supported Trump. There's plenty of bad things to say about Trump, the way he talks on Twitter. I don't like how he's spending, like, deficit spending. I don't like that. I don't like the fact that he bombed Syria. I don't like a lot of the brashness you don't mind, but not the way he, like, goes after people, punches down on Twitter. Things like that. Like, there's tons of, and I totally understand the people that are like this, he's an adulterer. That's terrible. So I get people that are like, no, I just don't like that person. I get it. There's this feeling on the right where you have these people that seem like, Trump's playing 4D chess. Every move he makes is every single tweet, every letter, misspelled letter or word is, strategically placed. I don't believe that at all. You know what it is? Trump's opposition happens to be bigger, or at least as big of a buffoon as he is. That's what it is. And so you've heard me say this before. Trump will come out and he'll say, like, yeah, Trump's sitting there. You can see how it happens. He's watching Fox News late at night, watching Tucker Carlson. Oh, here's a guy that talks about how Sweden, Islamic immigration in Sweden, refugees are a bad thing. So Trump tweets out, oh, man, did you see the attack in Sweden last night? Place is crazy. Immigration's crazy. Well, there was no attack. And so the Democrats, all they have to do is be like, yeah, Trump. First off, stop watching Fox News. Second, you misinterpreted what they said. In reality, there was no attack. Please get back to governing. Stop watching television. That's it. That's all they had to say. Instead, and this is indicative of what they do all the time, they come out and they say, not only was there not an attack in Sweden, but there's no problem at all with refugees in Sweden, and it's just a paradise on earth. And then people are like, well, wait, that's not true. Actually, there's tons of problems with these refugees coming into Sweden, and they're actually switching to more of a right-leaning government, like centrist for them, but far more right than what they always were, because they're starting to see the problems that are coming from a result of this. But so the Democrats just take a story and make buffoons out of themselves instead of just correctly calling out what Trump did. That happens over and over. The reason I bring that up is Trump's best chance and the Republicans' best chance in 2020 at this point is just to put a microphone in front of Ocasio-Cortez and be like, tell us about the Green New Deal again. That's it. And the average person's going to be like, wait, say this again? I'm basically not going to have an automobile. I can't fly in an airplane. You're basically going to try to get rid of all cows. You're going to pay, and this is where I'm going to get after that, but some of these other programs they have. And in addition to that, you really don't want borders. So it's basically free money for everyone in the country, and thus anyone should be allowed in the country. Where will we get the money? He asked Cortez. She's like, we'll just borrow it from the Federal Reserve, or we'll create new banks that will loan money. We'll create new government banks that will loan money to the government. And this is supposed to be for the who's going to pay all that money back? First, like, think of what happened. Okay, before I even get there. Now, as I know I'm ranting here, but I'm not super prepared today because of my work garbage. But so even that, maybe you could forgive. You could say, well, she truly believes the climate's this bad, that this is bad. So one, it's a bad negotiating strategy because she's going to cost her party dearly. And I cannot believe that Harris and Booker and Warren and them all came out and were like, yeah, good. We stand by this. We stand by these efforts. You know, I think it's just, I'm not just talking more. Like, again, I always, if you follow my show, I always try to split things to, like, what I think is morally right. I think the Green New Deal is morally wrong, but also strategically, what's the effect of here? So even if you morally think this is the right direction, at least to be heading, this is a strategic blunder. This is bad for the Democrats, which makes it good for me as a Republican, but not really, because I want to see two robust parties with reasonable ideas. Like, there is value in having an opposition. We need at least two parties, maybe more. You know, we need this strong opposition and things like that. And so what ends up happening then is we see this new mango Diet Coke sucks, by the way. But so we see it's going to be used again. Even Democrats, you see, like, quiet down, Cortez. And it's funny because the big line that was being used was, you know, I saw this just the other day, and a guest that was on Tucker that was like, oh, you're just taking Cortez's extreme plan, but no one's really taking that seriously. All the candidates running for president that have announced so far took it pretty seriously. They said it was a good idea. Hasn't been any counter proposals yet. And so where they're starting at from a negotiation stance, it's just, let's take another issue. Let's take the issue of abortion. And so the Republicans are making hay right now, rightfully so, because these abortion policies are crazy. The third trimester abortion, it's not popular to the average American. I don't know. I don't have the polling. This is my gut feeling. My gut feeling is that the average American is basically anti-abortion but pro-choice. And so they don't want abortions. They would recommend against them if you can, but they do think that early into a pregnancy, a woman should have a right to choose. I think that's the average. So it's not the extreme on the right, which is like life begins at conception, no abortion ever. And it's not the extreme on the left that would be like, you could have an abortion even while you're in labor for any reason you want. Most people fall somewhere in a sliding scale in between there. And so the Democrats, I think, are pushing it by coming out a little strong with these laws, celebrating them in places like New York, what the Virginia governor said. I did a whole show on that last week, so I won't get into it. But imagine then the Republicans come out and they're like, okay, our goal is basically to just have very early trimester abortions. And so the plan we'll put forth to get to that compromise is no abortion ever, the morning after pill is illegal, and not only are the doctors that would be doing these abortions, are they committing a crime, but the women would also go to jail for murder. Do you think that would be a successful compromise? No. The Democrats would seize on that and be like, you see, they're after these women. They want to control a woman's body. And they would be right. That's what that would show. They're trying to criminalize a woman that would want to have choice to even have an abortion in early. That's what this Green New Deal is doing in the opposite direction. It's allowing the Republicans to come out and be like, you see what they're after? Do you see what they're doing? And so, but again, let's say then even take all that aside and you say, okay, well, you could at least understand if Cortez really believes in this, that it would make sense for her to be pushing for these radical climate change and energy change policies. But if that's the case, then why add all this other garbage that has nothing to do with climate change? This bill literally says that the federal government will provide sustainability or income to people who are unable, which maybe you can make a cause for, or unwilling to work. Now, what in God's name does that have to do with the environment? Nothing. So you mean to tell me, look at how many people, for example, abuse the workers' comp or disability benefits. We know that it's a terrible industry of people disabuse, faking falls, insurance fraud claims, etc. This happens a lot. We're now literally going to be like, no need for that fraud anymore. We'll pay you to sit in your butt if you don't feel like working. Where in God's name are we going to get all this money? Who's going to be the janitors of the world? Who would take a job that sucks, that there's no like intellectual stimulation and it's literally just punching a clock 9 to 5 and doing grueling labor? Why would you ever take that job? Who's going to be in sanitation? Who's going to be doing like the jobs you see on Dirty Jobs? Now, sure, there are some people that like that work, and God bless them. They're better workers and better people than me. But a lot of these jobs, particularly like dangerous jobs and things like that, people are doing them because of the compensation. So if we're just like, we guarantee you that you could sit in your butt at home and you'll get paid, you're going to start to see a lot of this stuff coming. That quote, we'll get. But you're going to start to see, like, where is this money coming from? Where's the labor going to come from? Like, we're just going to borrow the money to pay people to do nothing now. And free healthcare for them. And free food for them. And free income for them. And basically anyone who wants to come into the country is fine. And we'll train you for any job you want. And we're going to completely eliminate fossil fuels in 10 years. And we have to completely upgrade the energy grid. And we'll update every house for safety and comfort. Like, this is insane. It's not even in the realm of possibility. So, like, I just don't understand. It's literally laughable. If she's concerned, if her concern is we're all dead in 12 years because of climate change, if I believe that, if I truly believe that, I would be like, I am only focusing on climate change. The bills I'm going to put forward will literally just be about energy and climate change, ways to solve climate change. We'll save the Medicare for all for later. We'll save the universal income for later. We'll save the, money for people that are unwilling for later. Like all of that stuff. Why wouldn't that all come later? And it's because it shows you what the agenda really is. It's not just climate change. Now, I'm not saying Cortez doesn't believe what she says, that we'll all be dead in 12 years. Or like I said, maybe she meant, I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. If we don't have a massive change in 12 years, then it's too late and we're all eventually dead in the future. I don't know which one she meant by those comments. So even if we give her the benefit of the doubt and go with the latter, isn't that all you would focus on? Picture, and she likens back to like World War II and like the New Deal and things like that, right? Picture that, right? Picture we're sitting around the generals talking in World War II, like, my God, this madman Hitler, if we don't stop him, there's going to be ethnic genocide the likes this world's never seen. There already was. The world will be overran by this madman. But what can we talk about universal income for people? What about people that don't want to work? We should deal with that also while planning for the war. That's insanity. You would be like, wait, what? Why embark on this huge crusade, this super controversial other thing that alone, just that idea of paying people that are unwilling to work, that is such a contentious, ridiculous, expensive idea that issue alone, just that issue alone would be enough to tie up Congress for the next 12 years debating about. But this woman who thinks we're all screwed in 12 years from climate change is like, I'm just going to throw this in as another little plank on the end of it. Bam. They've talked about things like reparations, talked about things like her original draft of this. I haven't seen if this language is in the new draft, talked about making sure these things were done basically by ethnicity, by groups that have been historically oppressed. So what does that mean? That now all these policies of giving away free money to other groups, we have to take into account what skin color you are, who your ancestors were. These are massively these programs on a one-by-one issue are massive and would take up the entire political capital of our congressional system. Yet it's all thrown together like one spitball against the wall. And what do they all have in common? More government. Now, I talked to a good friend of mine the other day who's someone I think that supports Cortez. I have a lot of good things to say about Cortez, believe it or not. I think, and I could be wrong, and I'll say this about Bernie as well, they actually care about people. I just think they're horribly wrong. I don't think they're evil people. I'm not saying that. I don't think they're corrupt. I think they care, and they just have this pie in the sky utopian vision that will end up very bad for people. And that even if they aren't corrupt, once we give that much power to the government, the corrupt will rise to take over that power. And we saw this, in Stalin's regime, for example. Jordan Peterson talks about this very good. Even if you are the 1 in a million person, that if you were given total power, total government control over an entire country, you're the one good person that would do things the right way. You'll just get shot in the back of the head by someone who is corrupt and will take over that power. That's why we shouldn't have a system that has that much centralized power. So I do think that. And here's another thing I think about Cortez where I could respect her is that I'm running for Congress, which is something I'm going to talk about after this. It is brutally hard. Now, Cortez had more help than I'll have. I think she had some kind of big nonprofits that were backing her. Nonetheless, I picture it went something like this. She was apparently a bartender. She's probably someone like, the 5 people that are watching right now. I don't know this. I don't know all 5 of you, but I don't think any of us are heavily involved in Washington. We're lobbyists, we're politicians or anything at this point. We just talk about this stuff and we're interested. We're here interested in having a conversation. We're polite, civil to each other. We might disagree with each other, but it's yeah, let's talk about the issues. We think it's important. And we get sick and tired of being why are our voices never heard? It seems like the people in Washington live in this bubble and we could go vote and we could vote for the person that says, I'll do X or I'll do Y, but X or Y never seems to get done. Maybe you're a total socialist. That's fine. And you're well, I keep getting promised, or you're a real progressive and you keep getting promised these progressive people, but then the party just keeps putting up people like Hillary, whatever, or you're someone you're a Tea Party person. You're oh man, for how many years were the Republicans going to say repeal Obamacare? And then they get into power and what do? Don't repeal Obamacare. Or both sides saying, oh, border security, and then the border's never secured. Or both sides saying, we're the party of peace, and then we still get all these regime change wars. And so I get fed up with it. And what do? I got a big mouth. I'm talking, I just started the YouTube channel. That was one of the reasons. But I'm talking on sites like Above Top Secret. I'm just talking at the bar to people or whatever, people at the ball game or whatever about stuff. But what am I really doing? And the first thing you could do, it's more important than anything politics, is just be a good person. Help out people in your community. Help out your family. But, when you're talking the political system, what can you do? It's screw it, I'll run for office, and I'll talk a little bit more about running for office here after this, like I said, but it's brutal. It's tough. It's going to cost me a lot of money. Already $500 like that. It's going to be done this week. You know what my tax return was? My wife's tax return, about $500. So there that goes, and I got enough money. I'm never late in the bills. I don't want people to feel bad for me. I live in a small apartment. I'm okay. But, $500 out of my savings is a substantial portion of that savings, to say the least. So, and so when I look at someone like Cortez, I think we vastly disagree on the solutions, but she probably cared about the people around her and was you know what, I'm going to run. And so I applaud that because I think one of the problems, and this is why I support term limits, one of the problems is even if you get in, you assume everyone, even though I know this isn't true, but for assumption's sake, we'll say, most people get in with the best of intentions, hey, I want to help my, fellow Americans, people in my community. But you start to realize you can't do things by yourself. So you got, you got to make small sacrifices. You got to take money from this place. Then you kind of owe them a favor and blah, 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 blah. And it keeps going on and on and on until eventually when you're there, if someone's like Robert Byrd was, or Pelosi or Feinstein, and it's all you're concerned about is maintaining power, It's all about winning that next election, and you kind of lost sight. Or even if you're still a good person, you live in this bubble in Washington. Everyone's super wealthy. Everyone has the same issues and the same thoughts. You forget what it was like back home in Tennessee or Kentucky or California or New York, or Georgia or wherever. You forget what the average person in your district is. And that's going to be really important for me because I'm running for District 12. It's one of the most rural districts in Pennsylvania, That the people living there are vastly different than the people living in Washington. So when you're there so long, you forget what it's like, those people back home. And so I tip my cap to Cortez for that. I think, you know what, regardless of what I think of her policies, she said, I don't like the way things are going, and she did something about it. And that, to me, is impressive. I respect her more, even though I disagree strongly with her ideas. And I think even if she's a good person, this idea of centralized power like she's pushing is going to be abused by others, if not her. But there are people in Washington that maybe even agree with me more that I respect less because at the end of the day, they don't have standards. They don't have, ethics. It's just, what do I got to do to win? What benefits me? I would rather someone that's doing the exact opposite of what I want, that's doing it because they think they're helping people, they're legitimately trying, than someone who's sure, I agree with you, Rob, but I'm only in it for me. I find the first person more refreshing. I do. Now, that doesn't mean I'll pull any punches as far as criticizing her policies, but you're not going to see me being she's a bimbo, blah, blah, blah. You haven't seen that from me. And I won't do that. I don't think that it's constructive, But I think this plan is very dangerous. And I think that the Democrats strategically need to separate themselves from this type of message. They're in a bad place. The Democrats are in a very bad place because on one hand, they know they need to appeal to this more radical side because it's the up and coming side. But on the other hand, you have kind of the party they're also like the neo-lib party, the party of the Hillary Clintons of the world that are raising tons of money. The Democrats at this point are the party of the very rich and the very poor. The Republicans are the party like the middle class. Now, that's obviously a gross oversimplification, but like you look at the richest people were donating to Hillary and the poorest people were voting for Hillary. The middle class was more voting Republican, voting for Trump and things like that. That's, again, an overgeneralization, gross overgeneralization, but you see what I'm saying. And so there are still those people, if you're one of these really wealthy people that are donating to the Democratic Party and all of a sudden you see the new up and coming star of the Democratic Party being like, not only should you pay more as someone who makes a ton of money, but you are immoral for having this much money. That's where Howard Schultz is like, well, I'm stepping off this train. This is getting crazy. And so now when she pushes something like this Green New Deal, well, you've pushed, if you're the Democratic Party, you've pushed this idea of climate change being the biggest thing for so long that you have to take it seriously. And so it's hard for you to be like, well, we're taking it seriously, but we think Cortez is taking it too seriously. So you have to kind of be like, yeah, this is good. We like what's going on here. And in the back of their mind, they're just like, dude, settle down a little. This is too radical. Now, if you're on the left and your climate change is your biggest issue, you're probably like, yeah, get him, Cortez. That's a good thing, And so that's where I see going with this Green New Deal. But I mean, again, if it's just about the environment, then why is all this other stuff in there? And to me, it's because she believes in socialism. And so does Bernie. And they call it democratic socialism. This is why you saw this, the Bernie scowl when Trump said we'll never be a socialist country. Why would he scowl? He's a democratic socialist. He's not socialist. It's different, right? Oh, no, it's not. And I just wish that he would be honest. I wish Cortez would be honest too. They want socialism. Just say it, to stop beating around the bush. Again, that's one of my biggest beefs in general with people in life, but particularly in politics. It's like, it's gun control is the most famous issue where this is the case. People on the right, you'll be like, dude, just admit it. You want every gun to be available to everyone no matter what, right? You think people should be able to have bombs or whatever. Just admit it. Oh, no. And then people on the left, it's like, just admit it. You don't want anyone to have guns, basically. As limited as possible. Oh, no. Now, granted, there's many people on the right and the left that doesn't apply. In fact, the majority. But some of the loudest voices on both sides, that's the extreme they want. And I just wish you'd admit it. At least if you admit it, we can have a constructive debate. No, just because you admit it doesn't mean that we can't find a compromise from your extreme closer to the center. It doesn't mean we can't do that. But when you're hemming and hawing, it's just like, that's why I truly think one of my positions running, you have to be so steadfast in like a position like gun control, because if you give an inch, that will be taken a mile. You know it. And you can hear it when they say things like, well, it's just these assault weapons that need to be gone. We'll define assault weapon, like fully automatic. Yeah, basically you can't get a fully automatic weapon unless you have like different permits and things like that. But the average person can't just walk around with a fully automatic weapon usually. Well, the ARs and stuff. Well, what is it about them? Well, it's because one pull of the trigger, one shot. Those type of guns should be illegal. Okay, that's it. Yeah, if they hold like more than 5 shells, they should be illegal. Why is that? Well, because they kill the most people. Well, no, actually, that's not true. Handguns kill more people every year, and they actually hold more than 5 bullets, and it's actually, most of them are one trigger pull, one shot. So they're actually semi-automatic as well. So you're saying get rid of handguns? No, not handguns, just this gun. Well, what is it about that gun specifically? Well, it's the way it looks. Well, you could take that black stock off and put a wooden stock on, and now it looks just like a regular hunting rifle, but it's still the exact same gun that can still pull one trigger, that still shoots a shell, that could still have an extended clip that could hold 15, 17 shots. You know what I mean? And it's like, just admit it. You just don't like the guns. Just admit it. I think a lot of those people are like, you can have a shotgun at your house, and that'd be about it. But even that, it's like a shotgun could do massive damage as well. So, yeah, just wish they'd be on it. Yeah, I do read the chat sometimes, Limek. I'm sorry. I get to rambling, and then, like, as you can see, there's a lot written here, so it's tough. But if you have anything to highlight that you would really want me to answer because I did there, please let me know. I have to go stir this soup for a minute or my wife will kill me. So give me 1 second. It's just right up here. I'll still keep ranting on. You could probably still hear me. My wife is making chicken noodle soup tonight and hot pepper soup. And so while she's at work, my job is to stir it and make sure that the heat's good on it. So, and what's terrible about doing a live stream is if I don't do it, my wife could just quickly scroll through my live stream of the day and be like, so yeah, Rob, I see you only got up one time to stir the soup, and I'll be in a lot of trouble. So I am currently stirring the soup, wife, if you're watching this later. And it does look awesome. But yeah, I thought the Green New Deal, and again, not to brag, but I am going to. I say not to brag, but I'm bragging. January 3rd, you could go look at my video from January 3rd. And I'm saying all this stuff that I finally just see people like Ben Shapiro and Fox News and even some Democrats talking about as of yesterday, you know, so. Mango Coke was killing me. So they got the feisty cherry Diet Coke. I like that. I'm supposed to be cutting back on sugar. I can do the sugar. It's the bread. It's killer. But yeah, that's my feelings on the Green New Deal in a nutshell. So yeah, I guess I might as well take this point. I'll probably have to leave at 4:30. I don't know if I'll go that entire time, but I want to talk about updates of me running for Congress. It will probably drastically affect what I'm doing with this channel in the next 2 to 3 months. That doesn't mean I'll be putting less stuff up, but I'm going to be putting more stuff directed towards me running for Congress. So for those of you that don't know, just real quick, I'm running for District 12. I don't currently live in District 12. District 12 in Pennsylvania goes everywhere from Susquehanna down to like Mifflin County. Basically, it's the most rural district in Pennsylvania. Williamsport's the biggest town, except you have some of State College. For those of you not from Pennsylvania, State College is where Penn State University is at. And so it's, you know, the predominantly, Nate, are you still there? If you're still there, I'll tell you something specifically. But a good friend of mine named Tom, who Nate will know, I think, who used to be my debate partner and roommate, is my campaign manager officially as of last night. And he's a really good guy. He's going to do a lot of help. He lives in the district currently. The reason I'm running for this is because I want to run, and because there has to be a special election because there was this Republican, Tom Marino, that won the seat. Tom decided to go to the private sector like 3 weeks after he won the seat, which is not good, in my opinion. Shouldn't have ran if you were willing to leave that quick. The reason that Tom ended up leaving, I think, is he wanted to be appointed as Trump's drug czar, who would be in charge of looking at like the pharmaceutical industry, the opioid crisis, and things like that. But unfortunately, Trump didn't pick him because it turned out that he took like $100,000 from the pharmaceutical industry for his campaign. And so it would have been a really bad look. Okay. So that's, in a nutshell, why there's this special election. In the special election, there is no primary. So you literally need what's called conferees, basically people that are in the GOP party at each of these counties to nominate you and then vote on you. And so I put my name in. I called a bunch of people in these counties, and I was waiting to hear back. And I finally heard back yesterday. And it's going to be a ton of work. The first thing I have to do is I have to pay $500 for a background check into myself. Which I had to have a background check because I work in home health care currently, but I don't think it will suffice. And I wonder if I think the background check's more than just crimes. I think it's also a background check into anything that wouldn't be a crime but could be embarrassing to the party, which I'm not too worried about. There's nothing really in my history. But so that's kind of the first step I have to take. And then I'm going to have to be traveling a lot on weekends to going out into these communities, which is fine because I'm going to be representing them, talking to people, things like that. Each county, I'm trying to get in touch with each county and seeing when each county is having kind of their meetings and see if they'll leave prospective candidates come talk to them. Now, I don't have an exact number, but I get the vibe that there's probably more than 20 people running, which is a huge amount because a lot of the people I've talked to is like, Here's the problem. We would love for each candidate to come and talk in one of our, regular meetings of the, whatever county GOP, Center County GOP or whatever. But there's so many of them. What are you going to do? It's a 2-hour meeting. If 20 people show up, you're going to leave everyone talk 5 minutes and that's it. It doesn't seem like much good will come of that. And so they're going to have a specific time and place. And even that, I don't look good on paper. I'm young. I don't have a lot of experience and stuff like that. I think that's all strong suit of mine, which I can get into later. But my actual strong suit is I'm good at talking. You put me in a room with other people, I think I have a really good understanding of a lot of the policies. I think I have policies that a lot of people, particularly in District 12, will like. They're big into like the Tea Party, Freedom Caucus. Ooh, excuse me. I'm big into all those things as well. I think my platform goes right in there with most issues. So I think they would like me, and I think I have a really good understanding. And I guess I'll say this real quick. I was talking to my buddy Tom, that's going to be my campaign manager, last night, and I was like, I'm not the type of guy that likes to brag about myself often. Now, I do like to brag about myself all the time, but kind of in a joking manner. But I'm more self-depreciating than bragging. And so I find the entire thing weird. Now, like when I did debate, you were confident, but you were pushing an argument, not yourself so much. You're like, yeah, my argument was the best. But it's being elected, it's more than that. You have to, yeah, right, make sure I have a criminal record. But it's more than, I have to sell myself as well, not just my ideas. And so you have to brag yourself up. So, I feel confident that you could put me in a room with any of these people that are running, and I will have at least an equal mastery of the topics that they have. And I think that the other thing is, I also work 60 to 70 hours a week, a full-time job. This is basically my hobby at this point. And so my selling point, one of them is, if this was my full-time job, I clearly enjoy it. I clearly have a passion for it, and I clearly am good at it. And I think one of the things I'm really good at is taking ideas that are detailed and having an understanding of them, and then being able to relate them to people that like have real jobs, that like work, like my friends that work in like construction, or they're farmers, or they're truck drivers, or they're welders. And I'm able to be like, hey, let me break down what's happening for you. For example, I think that if a lot of people knew, like, let me just take one issue. You hear Cortez and people talking about the income tax, right? Like, we should have a progressive scale of income tax. So 70% for people that make like over $1 million or something like that. Now it's a progressive scale, but you see, you know what I'm talking about. But that's not really the big issue for the most wealthy. The most wealthy aren't making income necessarily. They're getting money from investments, stocks, properties, things like that. That's all controlled under the capital gains tax. And basically, it's more nuanced than this. It's very complicated. But when you break it right down, basically the capital gains tax is paid at about half the rate that most income taxes are paying. So what does that mean? The wealthy people that have all these stocks and investment properties and things like that are actually, that's where they're getting all their money, and they're actually paying at half the rate as kind of the normal Joe Schmo that's working. So it's the income, when you're talking about high income, many times those are people that are like doctors, lawyers, athletes. Like, they're actually working their butts off, most of them. So why should they get punished more than, like, let's start, if you really want to make it fair, I think the average person would flip out and be like, wait, what? All these people that have all these stocks portfolios and stuff, they're paying less rate on those taxes than I am on my income? That seems absurd. You're right. But the average person doesn't know, because the system's so freaking complicated, and you're working a 9-to-5 job. You're trying to feed your family. God forbid you try to go out and have some entertainment and enjoyment in your life. Not everyone enjoys sitting around watching the news. Most people hate it. So what do you know? You just, you turn on the late night show and hear what all the, Democrat mouthpiece comedians are saying, or, you turn on your Facebook and you just hear an echo chamber of what all your friends are saying or whatever. But you don't know a lot of this nuanced stuff. And I think I'm pretty good at having an understanding of that stuff and articulating it to people that don't necessarily look at that stuff every day. So if I had more time to do it, if it was my job, I think I'd be even better. But so here's just a couple of the quick updates of what's going on with it. There's going to be a meeting that's going to occur in March, and it's where all the candidates will come together. The process basically looks like this. There will be X number of candidates. I don't know how many, but it's presumably a pile. You then have to be a candidate, you have to be nominated and seconded by someone. So that's the first step. I'll have to convince someone. The people that are voting aren't just that you might say, hey, I live in District 12. I would love to vote for or against you. Well, you don't have that opportunity. It's only conferees, and that's basically people that have been selected as part of the GOP or the Democrats will do the same with their candidate that they elect. And those kind of people in positions of power in that section will be the ones that get to vote. So it won't really do me any good if I could convince, everybody at the local restaurant or the local church to vote for me. It's only those conferees that make the decision to get me on the general ballot in the first place for the general election. And so once you're nominated, then they vote. You get to give, if you're nominated, you get to give a 5-minute speech, which I've been talking for an hour and 5 minutes right now, so it will be difficult. I'll do it. I'll be fine. But 5 minutes to kind of decide who's, that seems brutal to me. But what are you going to do if you have a lot of people? Then from that, they narrow it down to the top 10 people that got votes are then put up for a second round. You then get 5 more minutes. Then you vote, taking off the bottom person over and over and over again until someone gets the necessary above 50% of the vote. I think it is. So we'll see. I would think that my biggest obstacle is going to be a lot of people I've talked to are very nice. Everyone's been really nice in the process. But the idea of nepotism, that's maybe not the right word. Basically, there's a lot of people that have already made up their mind because it's like, yeah, this guy I know is running, so I'm going to vote for him. And so I don't know that it'll mean anything if I could be like, here's why I would have better policies than this person. Here's why I have a better understanding. And here's why stylistically I would be better for the district, the party, and the country on whole. And they might say, yeah, that's great. You did really great. But my friend Bob here is running, so I don't know. We'll see. My weak suit is, and they gave me this questionnaire that I have to fill out. And I won't show the questionnaire or anything like here, but it does ask a lot of policy positions, which is good. And it asks a lot of things that I think are humorous, like, do you have any embarrassing yearbook photo? After this week's debacle, not surprising that that's my yearbooks are pretty mild, I think. Nothing really crazy going on there. There might be some unflattering pictures of me at a bar, some me doing bad stand-up, or, the dreaded me thinking I'm good at karaoke and not being very good. But no blackface here, so I don't have that to worry about. But by the way, I think that's garbage. The fact that question's on there, it's like, oh my God, this is what politics has become. Now, I don't blame the GOP, the Pennsylvania GOP, for asking that question, but it's like, man, I swear to you, let's put it this way. Let's say I win the Republican nomination, right? And now I'm going up against the Democrat, and me and the Democrat are running neck and neck. It's 50-50. I don't think it'd be that. I think this is such a Republican heavy district. The Republican's going to have a huge benefit. And I think I will be a great candidate. And so I would win even more than Tom Marino won by. I'm very confident of that if I would be nominated. But let's say for whatever reason, it's 50-50. And all of a sudden it turns out 2 weeks before the vote that my opponent wore blackface and it came up. I swear to you, I would go on every media outlet and say that you should not reject that person from. If you think he's done other things racist, then fine. But please do not vote for someone because they had a stupid joke in the 80s. I swear to you, I would say that. I wouldn't want to win that way. My idea of running is, it's more of running on principle. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pander. Now, when I say pander, everybody panders a little. Like, for example, my buddy Nate that was watching, I know he's more concerned with climate change. I didn't change my position on climate change, though. I just changed how I'm selling my position based on my audience. So let me give you an example. I'm for legalization of marijuana. There's tons of reasons why. One of which is it's a plant that grows in the wild, and you should have the ability, the freedom to take whatever you want and put in your body unless you're hurting someone else. Another reason is because the Constitution specifically says that if it's not outlined in the Constitution, that it should be up to the state governments. So we shouldn't have a federal law against marijuana. But a lot of people don't want to hear those arguments. So, I'm talking one person in particular, I think it was like, well, but marijuana is like the scourge of the earth and druggies and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, okay, but here, all those drug cartels you hate, MS-13 and all these illegals and the coyotes coming up from Mexico, one of their big cash draws is the fact that we have all these illegal drugs, and then they're able to have a black market to get all this money. So actually, by legalizing it would be a huge step to finally stopping these cartels. Oh, yeah. You see, so I pandered in the sense that I'm being honest, that is one of the reasons I would want to legalize marijuana, but I'm not changing my position. I'm just not going to do it. You just change how you sell that position. Every position that each of us holds, not just politics, but in life, we have ton of reasons to hold those positions. And so some of those reasons are more persuasive to different audiences. But I will not change. I will not change. My entire idea is this is who I am. These are my positions. And if you should vote, you should educate yourself on what everyone's positions are. Vote for who you want. And if you say, yeah, I heard your positions, I don't like them, I'm going to vote for someone else, I will drive you to the polling station to vote for that other person. I really would. That's honestly how I feel. That's what, to me, it is not a job. It is not me running because I want to make money or I want to have influence or I want to have a job. It is me running because I don't like this way the system's going. And to me, the idea was when our founding fathers started to run, they didn't really want it. It was like service. You were serving society, like being a civil servant. You were going and saying, okay, most of them were like farmers and stuff. Man, I got to leave my farm for 2 years to go to Philadelphia or to Washington or whatever, serve for a couple of years and then come back. I did my duty. Now, by no means is it prestigious or as dangerous as serving in the military. I'm not trying to make that comparison. Those people are heroes, regardless of their motivation for going in, more than I'll ever be. But I am saying it's not supposed to be a career. You're supposed to be there to help your constituents, not to get personally, benefit from it. And so because of that, because that's the way I'm approaching it, I don't have to lie. I don't have to say, oh, I really need this. This is what it is, And so I'll get to you in a second there, Lamech. So because of that, I'll just be who I am. But one of the things you see is, like I was saying, they're asking a lot of questions like, who do you know? What businesses would back you? What politicians do you know? And it's like, yeah, you're right. I don't know a lot of them, but that's the point to me. I'm running on the principle that I wish regular people had more influence. I wish they'd vote more. I wish they were listened to more by their politicians, and I wish they'd run for office more. And if you're a regular person, you're sitting there, and you're just some guy that's punching the time, or lady that's punching the time card 9 to 5, you should run too. Do what you can. And that's why I'm running. So I'm not going to change who I think that is a good thing. I think that the problem that we have a system right now that one of the first questions you're asked is, oh, you're running for office. It's not, what do you think about the national debt? Or what are some of your biggest positions? The first question's like, so who do you know? Yeah, no one. That's kind of the problem, that's the question. I don't mind that it's asked. And everyone has the right to decide how they want to vote for whatever reason they want. Don't get me wrong. But, that's just my feeling. I think that we should have more. So I'll fill out this questionnaire. I'll send it in. It has a bunch of policy positions it's asking me. I'm going to start putting out videos. I'm going to try to make them see this guy, Tom, that's running my campaign. He's a really smart guy. He's a great guy. And he's advised me, and I think he's absolutely right. Take each position you got, make it a 3-minute YouTube video. Bam. Tax reform. Bam. 3 minutes. Second Amendment. 3 minutes. Abortion. 3 minutes. Put them out there, properly label them. Here's my feelings. That way, if any voters or potential conferees want to see, or if I win the nomination, voters, it's not something where you have to go look at a newspaper report I did. Isn't that frustrating? It's so frustrating to me. Like, and here's another thing. Like, you elect these people. What are they doing every day? If I get elected, at least once a week, I will be doing a video on social media. It's like, this is what I did this week. Here's how I voted. Here's why I didn't vote for this. Here's the committees I was on, and within reason what you're allowed to talk about. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff you're not allowed to talk about. I wouldn't violate any, laws on giving classified information or anything like that. But you kind of give a general. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to turn on YouTube and be like, I wonder what my representative did this week. Oh, he was in, D.C. They voted on the new farm bill. That's cool. How did he vote? Oh, he voted this way because of X. Here's a link to where I could read the farm bill. Great. Wouldn't that be great? That's the type of stuff I want to do. I also think I'd be great at reaching demographics that Republicans normally don't. For example, to me, it seems a shame that a lot of the Republican idea seems to me, and I know they would push back at me, but let's be honest. It seems that it's like, we hope that young people and women and minorities don't turn out in big numbers. That's not a strategy. I want every person to vote. I want them to be educated. I'm not going to be one of these, MTV, get out and vote. Vote this way because, Usher voted that way. Yay. No, educate yourself. And that doesn't mean you have to sit there hours. Just kind of be like, come up with positions you hold and then look to see which politician favors those positions closest to you and then vote for them. Doesn't mean you have to have a massive understanding, know exactly where they took money from, what they did in high school. their love life. Yeah, who cares about any of that stuff? Just kind of get an idea, like, what's your biggest issue? I'm for gun control. I'm against that, but let's say that's someone's biggest issue. Okay, there's two people running. Check out their stances on gun control. Won't be that hard, and then go vote based on that. That's perfectly fine. You had a reason to vote for who you did. That's great. I wish everyone would do that, even if that means my party losing more. At least there's some manner of education. There's people being informed and they're exercising their civic duty. That's great. I want minorities to go out and vote. I want young people and women to go out and vote. I could sell why my message and the Republican message is better for those groups than what the Democratic message is at this point. That's the entire point. And I think the Republicans are making huge blunders in not reaching out to those communities more. I think that's something that I'd be able to do. So enough bragging about myself. So I'll be putting out a lot of videos, is what I guess I'm trying to say in a long-winded way, that deal specifically with that election. But I think that even if you're not someone that's going to vote in that election, or you could give two craps whether or not I get elected or not, you still might find my position on that stuff interesting. I'm going to try to make them like 3-minute videos. And then there's a couple other things that will go in with that election thing, but that have to do with my YouTube channel as well. Nate that was on here is going to do a video with me at some point, which Nate, I'll email you. I think he may have left the channel or left the view at this point, but he's maybe going to be doing a one-on-one or a three of us at a round table kind of doing a video, which will be really cool. But I have one of the things that's been really cool is I have so many people that are just friends of mine, or sometimes not even really friends, just acquaintances that have offered me help. And I've had people offer me financial help, which I know one person on this chat has, which is really cool. But I've had people offer me all kinds of help. Like I have a good friend that helped me with camera purchases for the channel and microphone purchases, how to set my resolution, just some stuff like that. I have a friend right now that's helping me design a logo that'll be used as an intro for all of my videos and hopefully then be used on campaign signs. I have another friend who is making me an instrumental music clip that I could use at the beginning and the end of my videos. Then I have another friend that's helping me set up a webpage. This is all stuff I don't know crap about. And these people were just like, yeah, we support your idea of informing people that normally, getting different voices in the conversation. That's basically it. And a lot of these people, I have a lot of people, like some of my campaign manager, Tom, Democrat, a lot of my friend Aaron that came on and did the show with me that's helped me, big Democrat. Like a lot of these people don't agree with all of my politics, but they agree with the idea of like, yes, let's get more normal people involved. It shouldn't be reserved for, a bunch of people that are involved in politics or you have a lot of money. It should be the situation where a normal person who represents their constituents can go. And I think that actually is the biggest issue. And that's why when I'm talking about Cortez and Bernie, even though I'm on the fence with Bernie. With Cortez, I think she's crazy. I think the plan's laughable. I think it's really dangerous as well. But I do think she probably cares about her constituents. I could do more with that. I could work with those people. Maybe not her. She seems to be kind of... this Green New Deal is brutal. It's a brutal... and she believes it. That's what's up. But you see what I mean. That, at least people that are honest, you could have a discussion with. And then leave the average person figure. But the people that you really got to worry about, it's like the deep state, which people laugh at me and call me a conspiracy theorist. I thought it was funny. My buddy Aaron, when he was on it, was like, deep state, what are you wearing a tinfoil hat? What do you even mean by that? I'm like, the lobbyists, the businesses, the establishment politicians that have been there for lifelong, and the people in the intel community that really shape the positions of this country. Oh yeah, why didn't you just say that? Well, yeah, because that's pretty wordy. So it's not as tinfoil hat as you think. Most people agree with that. So what would I do if Cortez wins election in the next 10 years and starts implementing more social progress in the way that makes Russia look liberal? I think, okay, here's something, how do I put this? I think socialism's terrible. I could give tons of reasons, which somebody who was on the channel here earlier didn't seem to like that. Socialism's, I think, a terrible idea. There are other ideas that I think are terrible. The first thing I would say is if Cortez, I would fight every way I could, not physically, obviously, but to win elections, to get my idea out there, not me to just personally win elections, but people I think they're advocating policies against that. I would do everything I could to stop those policies from being implemented. But at the same time, I would cheer to be proven wrong. Now, I think there's a pretty darn good track record of socialism being terrible, being bad for human rights, being bad for personal freedoms, all the things that I think make this country great and that I value the most as a human being. But no matter who gets elected, whether it be to president, to Congress, and I said that I'm not just blowing hot air. I said this after the 2018 congressional elections where the Democrats made a lot of gains. I am pessimistic that they'll be effective. I think their policies would hurt this country. But I am rooting for them to prove me wrong. I am rooting for them to be like, wow, I was against these Democrats. I'm against Cortez's idea. They came in and started to implement them. I fought tooth and nail because I knew the implementation would be bad. And I was wrong. And they did great. So no matter what, I will cheer for this country to do great. Period. I will. And I think that I have great positions as to why these socialist ideas would fail. They would be terrible, but I would still root for. What will we see if those type of policies would start to be implemented? I mean, the Green New Deal is so ridiculous. You would see, here's the first thing that would happen. Like, absolutely, the absolute first thing that would happen. As soon as that would pass, in fact, if it even started to come to the point where it looked like it had the potential to pass or that it was going to come up for a vote, the stock market would decline like you have never seen because business confidence would bottom out. Energy has every single company that operates in the United States relies on energy. If they were told, guess what? You have to totally revamp your entire system on everything you ship, everything you produce, because the energy you're using today will not be available in 10 years. They would just be like, sell everything. Get out of this country now. We need to go to any other country. We can no longer produce here. That's the very first thing that would happen. Everyone's 401k would bottom out. It would be absolute pandemonium. It would be incredible. That's day one. That's how things would start on day one. The innovation that we would need to get there. See, most green energy here's the beauty of capitalism, right? Like, people could complain of, here's the truth. There is no perfect system. There never will be a perfect system. Capitalism just happens to be the best system we've had so far economically. Now, that doesn't mean that we always will have some sort of mixed economy. And by that, we'll have capitalist-esque policies and socialist-esque policies. So therefore, you could have a capitalist system with social safety nets, which are kind of more of a social leaning towards a socialist policy, but that doesn't make you a socialist country. For example, Denmark, Sweden, all these countries, they have free markets. That's not socialism. They just have huge tax burdens and big social safety net programs, social welfare programs. But that's still not socialism. Now, you might say that's closer to socialism, and I prefer that system, but that's not socialism, like the state owning all these energy companies like Cortez is proposing, massive debt borrowing, the state having this total control over your life. It's not that anywhere close to what Cortez is suggesting. So, but capitalism drives innovation because regardless if you like it or not, a lot of times people are working and they're interested in being innovative because they know it'll be of personal gain to them. So right now, for example, the companies that are leading the way in green energy are the energy companies, the people that are running the coal plants, because they want to keep making those dollars. And they're afraid someone will come along with a cleaner fuel and be able to make that money, and coal will become obsolete. And then all of a sudden they lose everything they've invested in loss. So they're constantly like, okay, we need to invest in newer technology. How do we make clean coal or coal cleaner? How do we have like wind or solar or, tidal, all these different types of power that you might be looking to? Those are the groups that are looking into it. And there's other groups looking into it. And the way our system works is there is a profit incentive to find that. If that's removed based on Cortez's plan, which admits that it'll be the state that's controlling many of these things, then all these private businesses will be like, out, we're going to head to a different country. Anyone that has the ability to do that will. Or if you are investing in clean energy right now, you're going to be like, this is pointless. The government's basically, you'll have a bunch of Solyndra-like companies that the government starts funneling money to that's just like, sweet, we got our money. We don't have to do anything. And a bunch of corrupt friends of, and you see this in every socialist country. Once you give the government this power, then they're able to benefit their friends. And so we'll take all this massive tax revenue, all this massive money we're borrowing, and we'll give it to people that are, friends of the people that are in power at that point. And then they'll do jack squat because what's their incentive to do anything better? Doesn't matter because you can't be a billionaire. You can't. It's immoral to accumulate a bunch of wealth anyway. So just take what you already got. No need to work harder. You're doing fine. And that's what will happen. There won't be the innovation that we're looking for then. So it would literally be a nightmare if somehow that got passed. And here's the problem: we will have another recession, and part of it is because of Trump. I think the economy is doing really good right now because Trump rolled back regulations. He did a lot of things that are very good. But we're going to see another banking sector collapse. And here's something I can agree with my socialist friends on. Why are we going to see that? Because the corruption still exists. The corruption that caused the 2008 banking sector still exists today. We still see faulty mortgages being given out, manipulation of the markets and things like that in illegal or unethical ways. And why, you might ask, how could that be happening a mere 10 years later? Well, the reason is no one got punished. That's why. And it's not a matter of, they're evil corporations, so we have to throw out capitalism. It's a matter of capitalism still says there are a set of rules that everyone has to abide by. Those rules aren't being enforced. The reason they're not being enforced is because they rely on government to enforce those rules. So by making the already government that's basically allowing their friends to break the law bigger, it's not going to solve. Those corporations will just say, sweet, we can just lobby the government even more. Now they have more power to throw us kickbacks. We have more power to be unethical and break the law because now the government has even more power. And so what we need to do instead of saying we need to massively expand government power is get people in government that are willing to enforce the laws we already have. We already have monopoly laws. We already have laws that say you can't engage in this unethical behavior. We should punish these bankers and these corrupt oligarchs to the fullest extent of the law when they break the law. We should not fall into the trap of saying everyone that makes so much money is unethical. That is garbage. There are plenty of people that are millionaires and even billionaires that developed a product or that people liked or developed a skill that people liked, didn't do anything illegal or super unethical, and they're providing jobs for people. For example, I'm not exactly someone who shares politics with the Bill Gates, but he developed a product that all of these people wanted. Products that I use partly. Why is that unethical? He's created thousands of jobs, by the way. You know, just because he has a bunch of this money, it means it's unethical. No, I don't believe in that. And I think once you set that message, what you're doing is you're making it immoral to be innovative is what you're doing. You're crushing personal liberty and freedom. It's the idea of crushing competition, right? And you can see this in life. The same type of people that suggest this type of stuff are the people that are like, everybody gets a trophy. We're all winners. No, competition is good. Winning and losing is important. Both of those things are important to happen in your life, you know? And so that's what we're de-incentivizing by like this idea of Cortez and stuff. You have to, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it, and you know, each country is different as far as how you need to treat them. You know, there's this idea of tariffs. So it's someone who it kind of leaned more. Well, yeah, then that's okay. Fair enough. I'm overgeneralizing, but you see what I'm saying? There's plenty of people that are rich. And here's a good example, right? Like Cortez says that if you're like a ultra rich person, you're immoral. She think that about Oprah? Because there was a lot of people that were like, Oprah should run. You know, Oprah should run. That was a big, Oprah would do very well in Democratic circles. Are we going to see Cortez, if Oprah decides to run as Cortez and a bunch of socialists going to come out and be like, Oprah, she's immoral. You know, she's holding on to all this money. There's people starving. She's holding on to this money. That's ridiculous. What a scumbag. Is she going to say that? No, of course not. Because of identity politics. And that's another problem with Cortez and this idea. Socialism is, you know, identity politics was a backdoor to get back into communist socialist ideas because it's based on cultural Marxism. And so now we're seeing the fruit of that. We're seeing open advocacies for socialism. And, you know, I read someone on, I can't remember where I read this, but someone was saying the Green New Deal is exactly what the Democratic Party wants. They want basically total government control over industry, energy. They want everyone reliant on government. And this is exactly what a lot of the Democrats want. The problem is they should have waited until they were in power to say it. Instead, Cortez spilled the beans, so to speak. And now it's like... you know, it's a bad thing. Capitalism's immoral in its roots. That's not true. That's not true at all. I don't think that's true at all. Capitalism is not immoral. Like people say greed. It's not just greed, right? It's desire for self-fulfillment, for self-success. That's not necessarily greed. You know, if you're an Olympic athlete and you decide to lift weights and bust your butt every day because you want to be the best in the world and you want to win a gold medal at the Olympics, is that greed? It only becomes greed when your success is directly, you know that it's directly responsible to the pain caused to other people or some unethical action taken to other people. That's when it becomes, to me, greed and something that's bad. It is okay for a business to say, we want to be the most successful business in the world. We want to make tons of money. We want to innovate, and we want our stockholders to make money. That's not a bad thing at all. Just like it's not bad to say, we want to win the Super Bowl. We want to win the World Series. We hope we win every game. We hope we crush our opponents. That's not a bad thing. When we say, no, that idea of greed's bad, then what we do is we have this system where it says that there's something immoral about the idea of wanting to be successful and having personal success. And that leads to the socialist paradise like Venezuela and places like that. One of my favorite morality. Well, I mean, certainly you could argue that the systems where capitalism has been most effective and been most pure have been systems that have also been buttressed by the ideals of Christianity. That's certainly true. But, I mean, the capitalism, like, there's all sorts of moral things that come with capitalism. Now, granted, any system can be exploited. Like, that's true, right? Like, and this is something like Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot too, who's a philosopher I really like. He talks about the idea of hierarchies. And you often hear, one of the problems we have is with labels. I just did a video on this. A bunch of my close friends told me they can't come on my channel and talk with me because they're left-leaning or they're Democrats. And the titles of some of my videos will say something like, Democrats are hypocrites on this. And even though the content of my video, I'm like, I'm not talking about my friends that are Democrats. I'm not talking about all Democrats. I'm just talking about the establishment Democrats that are advocating this. And they're like, yeah, but you need to change your titles to that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to do better with that. But it's hard in the limited space we have. And as humans, it's hard because the way we need labels to be able to communicate. But those labels, oftentimes, if you're smart or you're nefarious, you know how to massage how we use those labels to prove a point, or to try to like best your opponent in an argument intellectually. And so you try to be ethical about those labels as possible. But sometimes, even if you're trying to be ethical, there's so many different definitions for certain labels that it becomes difficult. Like, for example, liberal versus conservative, left versus right, right? And you have, like, I'm on this website above Top Secret. You'll have these like in-depth conversations that people are having where it's like, was Hitler right-wing or was he left-wing? Was Stalin right-wing or was he left-wing? Is like Islamic extremists, do we consider that right-wing or left-wing? And there's different ways you could look at it. You could say, I could make the case that Hitler's call for identitarian politics with saying we have a master race and we need to take out some races is just like cultural Marxism. It is saying dividing us by immutable characteristics like race, religion, etc. And that's more of a left-wing principle. Therefore, the things that Hitler took out, that led to a lot of his major crimes and worst atrocities, were a left-wing idea. Another person come along and be like, that's garbage. Hitler was a fascist. That's more of a right-wing ideology, blah, blah, blah. And there's it depends on how you label it. So I heard Jordan Peterson, he's like, here's basically the left and the right, or conservative and liberal, and here's the way he explains it. You start with this position that there are things in life that are just truth. There are things that we are, what's the word I'm looking for, that just self-evidently are more viable, such as starving to death is bad. Eating food is good. Not starving is good. Okay, like we can agree, that's good. As soon as you say there are some things that are desirable or good, you've created a hierarchy, because that means that there are people then that will be better at getting food than other people. There are people that will be really great at it at the top, and there'll be people that are really bad at it, and people all the way through the middle. And there's all kinds of equations and philosophies that goes into this, how the people at the top almost always are contributing something like 30 to 40% of the value of things. So in other words, like the top 5% of people are like getting 50% of the food for everyone as a group. You could liken that to anything, sports. Baseball. It's good to be good at baseball. Okay. Well, there's people who are really good and there's people that are terrible. But the top 5% of people are like so much better than everyone, etc. That goes on. You can put that to anything. Conservatives are people, or right-wing people are people that say, yes, that hierarchy is necessary and we should have, they're inevitable and they're necessary and we need to have them. The people on the left and the liberals are saying, okay, but The problem with hierarchies is the longer they stay around, they become corrupt. So it's no longer just competency, right? Because we want people that are you want the person that legitimately is the best at getting food to be at the top of the hierarchy. You don't want someone that just because of nepotism or because he had the most money or something like that, he's the best at getting food. And food's just an easy example, but you see what I'm saying? You could apply this to anything. And so we need to constantly be evaluating to make sure there's not corruption in this hierarchy. And we also need to understand that the people at the bottom are, suffering under this hierarchy. Now, what makes the United States and the idea of capitalism great is there are so many hierarchies going on at the same time that you might be terrible at one, but you're good at another. That's what capitalism allows. It allows specialization. That was the entire idea. So instead of all of us, like all on our own frontier farm, having to milk the cow and, blah, 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 do everything, build your own house. You're like, oh, I'm best at raising the cows. And you're best at building the houses. So you build houses, I'll raise cows. And those are two hierarchies. So now everyone, basically, you have a far better chance of being successful in a hierarchy that matters. That's the idea behind it. But that's the definition of how we say, like, the left versus the right. Both of those sides are necessary. Both of those sides are competent, right? So that's why that's why I think capitalism is the best system. It has these hierarchies. It understands these hierarchies. What socialism seeks to do is it says, like, basically we should get rid of these hierarchies, right? That we should flatten everything out. The person that's the best shouldn't get extra. There's no reason to be better. Everyone needs to be level. We all need to be equal. And that this is when you get into these nuanced conversations of the difference between equality and equity. What I believe is we should all have equal opportunity, which means that as a government, there should be no laws designed to help people based on immutable characteristics. That's why affirmative action is a terrible idea. That's why reparations are a terrible idea. It is not our government's role to enact these, to try to go back centuries and solve past injustices. Our government's role is to say we will treat everyone equally. Yes, we know that that's not life. We know that some people were born with advantages, others weren't. It could be you were born rich. It could be that you were born healthy. It could be that you were born like strong or tall or beautiful or any of these things. You were born smarter. But we can't have a government. Our political system can't be designed to try to flatten that out. It just says everyone has equal opportunity. That's what we should strive for government. What's happening with this identitarian cultural Marxism and socialism in general is saying, no, it's not just everyone should have equal opportunity. It is that the outcome should all be equal. Therefore, we equalize the outcomes amongst these categories, these identitarian politics categories. So outcomes have to be equal amongst race, and they have to be equal amongst gender, and they have to be equal amongst sexuality, and they have to be equal amongst what else? Intelligence, strength. And so you have this idea that you de-incentivize innovation, you de-incentivize excellence. That's why competition is important. That's why, there's this idea, and this is important because you see what it's doing. It's saying we shouldn't have winners and losers. We should all be equals. No winners, we're all winners, but that's another way of saying there are no winners. If we're all winners, there are no winners. What makes you a winner is that there are people that aren't winners in that particular activity, right? You win because you won the game and someone lost the game. Now, if you lost the game, does that mean you lose all games or that you're worthless? No, not at all. One of the most influential things that ever happened in my life was this. I was in policy debate, and I went to Clarion University. You didn't have divisions, right? So it wasn't like Clarion football. Clarion football is not going to play Alabama. They're playing Lock Haven, like smaller schools. There's different divisions. Debate's not like that. You debate Harvard, you debate Yale or Northwest. Yale, I never debated Yale, but they don't have a big policy debate team. But you debate Harvard, you debate all these Ivy League schools, right? Cal, Berkeley, whatever. And so here's Clarion. People were always like, "Where's Clarion? Where's that?" So it was interesting. I also had a disadvantage in that most of the people that were engaged in debate at the highest level if they didn't go to private schools, they at least went to schools where they were debating in high school. And you basically have 4 to 5 years of eligibility in college. So I had to make up in 4 years what people had been doing for 10 years by the end of it. They debated 6 years in school, high school or middle school, and then, went to a college on a debate scholarship at the highest level. I mean, these people most of them are way smarter than me. And so we were trying to be the first state school, like basically small school, but the first team from Clarion to ever make it to the national debate tournament. And just real quick, the national debate tournament's like the NCAA basketball tournament. It takes the top 72 teams, but it's even more exclusive than the NCAA tournament because each school could have up to 3 teams. So, for example, like the NCAA tournament, it used to take 64, but what's it now? It takes like 70 or something. You have playing games. But anyways, imagine that Kentucky was like the top 5 people on Kentucky's team they were ranked number 1. And then the next 5 people on Kentucky's team were ranked number 6. And then the next 5 people on Kentucky's team are ranked number 30, And so you would only have like 20 schools in the NCAA basketball tournament if that was the case, because they would recruit everyone because it'd be like, hey, the way it is now, you split out the recruits because you don't want to sit in the bench for Kentucky. You want to play for maybe a smaller school if you're not one of those 5 best on their team. Anywho, so you maybe have 30 schools that are in the NDT. It's very difficult to get in. And the guy that came before me tried real hard and just narrowly, him and his partner, she was good too, they narrowly missed making it. So I'm trying this one year, me and my partner, and I'm talking work until 2 a.m, doing research every night, practice debates, research, cutting evidence, doing everything we could to do better. And like, you have this idea, you watch all these movies and you play all these video games and you read all these books and it's like, I'm going to win, I'm going to make it. And you know how I know? Because I'm doing it the right way. And that's what happens. And so we did everything the right way. And we were likable. And, people liked us. People were rooting for us. And we went, and guess what happened? We lost. That's what happened. And I remember that was one of the defining moments of my life because I really started to think about things. And it's like, I'm not special. It's not like the world's operating just for me. I did everything, like all these tropes that tell you, just work hard and you'll make it. I worked hard. I did things the right way. Granted, I was drinking a little here and there. I was still having a life. I was still having fun. But you see what I mean? You do everything right. It's like, like you watch any sports movie or any competition movie where there's the montage, they're working hard, they go to the end, they're the underdog, they finally make it and they win. We did all that and we lost. And I was like, yeah, I'm glad this happened. That's one of the defining moments of my life. It taught me something. And so you know what I did the next year? I worked harder and we did make it. But who cares if we wouldn't have? It still taught me something. And when we made it, it was special because we did lose. That's what made it special. Because we knew we did something, and that's a proud moment in my life. If the idea of equal outcomes for all, what would that have meant to me? You all win, you all make it. The tournament will just be 1,000 people where we call everything a tie. Yippee! Would have I learned half the knowledge I know now? Would I have became half the persuasive speaker I am now? No. The competition's what made me thrive. And I'm like that in anything in life. Dude, like, you could, like, we can go raking leaves, me and someone else, and if it's just like, we got to do this yard, we'll get it right. But if it's somehow a race, like, whoever finishes their half of the yard first gets the other person's buying them a beer, I'm going to be busting my butt. Like, I'm just that type of person. Competition's good, and it's good for economies in general. That's not an immoral thing whatsoever. And so, I'll be right back. I got to stir the soup again. I don't want to get in trouble. I do apologize if you all could hear me. That I know I should do a better job on the chat. It's really difficult though because one of the things. Well, here. Sit down. I recommend that you follow people like Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin's one I really like, but there's others like Jimmy Dore. Oh my gosh, I got soup in my shirt. Jimmy Dore and other things like that. And the reason is a lot of these channels, even when I did my discussion with my friend Aaron, and I really, again, if any of you are interested in doing a discussion with me, I know, Jesse, you might be interested at some point, but if anyone would be interested, we could do it online. I don't have to show your face, don't have to use your real name, or you can come, if you live in the area and you want to come to my place, we could do it and then go down to the bar downstairs afterwards or whatever. You can crash at my place. I got a couch that pulls out into a sleeper, whatever you'd want to do. But I love having the discussions. Discussions are way better than just me rambling. But one of the things is that I don't like about the mainstream networks and stuff is you get these people on, and even if they're intelligent people and they're having a good discussion, it's like they get a 3-minute segment, right? If you're watching Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow or Anderson Cooper, and CNN's the worst because not only do they have like these 5-minute segments, but they have 15 people on a panel. So you get like 20 seconds. So you're trying to stand out. And so what do? You kind of make the most ridiculous point. You just say, Trump's a Hitler. Yeah, and that's how you get the most notoriety or the most attention out of that. And that's not good. I like the long form discussion. And you see this, Dave Rubin's a great example of that. He'll get someone on, sometimes he gets two people on that disagree, and it's just like, dude, we got an hour. Let's hash something out. And that's kind of, to my credit or discredit, it's probably to my discredit. I get on a subject, and it's like, I could say what I want in 3 minutes, but I end up drawing it out for 25 minutes. But because I think it's more complicated than just giving like a little soundbite. So let me see what else I had to talk. So something, I guess, that's worth talking about since we're going on socialism. It's something kind of along those lines. Is in Pennsylvania, our governor, Tom Wolf, is considering passing $15 minimum wage law. And I think that this is a huge mistake. I've had people ask me about this. I think it's a huge mistake. It's a really bad idea. In fact, yeah, that's a good point, Jesse. Let me talk about this minimum wage thing first. $15 an hour minimum wage. I've never made $15 an hour in my entire life. I kid you not, I probably shouldn't say how much I make. Not that I care that you people know that it's not that, but if someone from my company was working, my company probably doesn't want others knowing how much each of us make, but I don't care. I make $14.99.7 an hour. Not quite to the $15 range yet. So someday I'll make as much as McDonald's workers in Oregon or whatever, Seattle. Now, having said that, I have nothing against McDonald's workers. I did a video the other day where I talked about how if you deal in retail and if you're dealing with the public, it's one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have. I don't think that means you should be making $50 an hour, because there's other things. There's more than just how difficult your job is that goes into how much you're paid, such as what is the competition for the labor in that market? What is the skill set that you need? Things like that. But you'll never hear me make fun of people that work in retail, whether it be fast food or, retail like Walmart or something like that. That's tough, man. Dealing with the public's tough, and you're better than me. I did it for years, but I was like backline. I flipped burgers. They didn't want me dealing with the people. I wasn't very good. And I'm a pretty jovial guy, but you're in there and some people are having their worst day, they're having a bad day. So they just take it out on you, and you got to sit there with a smile on your face. Some of the people I worked with at Burger King, man, like, my hat's off to them. I don't know how they put up with like some of the abuse they did. So, I'm not making fun of them for that. Not only do I think that $15 an hour minimum wage is a bad idea, but I might say something that I'll go further than that, and people might think that I'm nuts for saying this. I think that a minimum wage in general is a bad idea. I do not think we should have a minimum wage. Now, this is in theory, obviously. I don't know how it would work in practice. One of my favorite economists is a guy by the name of Milton Friedman. And he talks, so you should check out some of his YouTube videos. They're fantastic. It's Milton, which is my middle name, though I was not named after Milton Friedman. And Friedman's his last name. He talks a lot about this. It's the nature of what is labor. Labor is an agreement between the person providing the labor and the employer. They reach a consensual agreement at how much that particular labor is worth. Now, we had a system designed where you have to ask yourself, what is the minimum wage doing then? It is telling, one way of looking at it is like it tells employers how much, at least at a minimum, they have to pay someone. But what it also does, another way of explaining it is, it tells people that wish to be laborers that it is illegal for them to sell their labor until it gets to a certain value. And so what does this mean? Well, Milton Friedman talks about the groups that were most affected by minimum wage are ironically the groups that the people pushing minimum wage sought to protect the most. And so you had a bunch of left-leaning people that are pushing minimum wage, and they also advocate for things like minority success and things like that. Well, the minimum wage actually hurts the black community more than any other community, and here's why. You're coming out, and he's talking particularly in the 70s, but it's true today. You're coming out of things like the civil rights movement, where legitimately black people did not have an equality of opportunity. No one's asking for the equity, the equality of outcome, but they did not have equality of opportunity due to things like Jim Crow laws, other things like that. And so they weren't receiving that. And so when they first started coming out of that, a lot of blacks didn't have the same access to education, skill sets that had been for generations for other groups. And so an advantage you had as a black person, particularly a young black person, was you could go to a company and say, a company's like, let's say you're an owner back in the 60s of a company and you're like, okay, on average, I think that white people probably have better education. So if you had to choose for the same price for people you barely knew about, or white and a black, you'd probably go with the white guy because you assume they had a better education. What the black person was able to do was to say, I could do that job at less cost to you. So the white person might say, I'm willing to do this job for $3 an hour. And a black person could say, I'm willing to do it for $2.50. So at that point, the employer's like, all right, I'll take the $2.50. Then when the black person's there working, they're getting the skill set that comes along with the job, which allows them to not only prove their competency at the job, but then to advance because they now say, I have this skill set I learned on the job. And actually, we're starting to see another big point I have is I don't know how successful academics are anymore. I think that we're starting to see that academia is kind of this left-wing groupthink, and that, like, particularly things like liberal arts degrees aren't really training people for real-world work experiences, and on-the-job experience is so much better. In other words, what I'm saying is, if you're an employer and you're currently only hiring people that require a degree, you may be further ahead to just go into high school and find people that are interested in your type of job and recruit them as an intern right out of high school, train them how you want them to be trained, and then you know they're competent once you start paying them. So instead of going to a 4-year school and students having to pay tons of money to basically learn nothing that will help them with the actual job they get, and then expecting to be paid as soon as they're out of college, they don't get any debt whatsoever. They go to work as interns for these companies, learn for like a year or so, and then all of a sudden are debt-free, and they're making the money it would have taught them 5 more years to be making, and with a huge student debt. So that applies to this situation as well. Yeah, Mike Rowe is fantastic for saying this. He talks about how things like trade schools or just like blue collar work, actually you could live debt free. It's a really good thing. So what happens is then what the minimum wage law came in and did was it said, no, blacks can no longer sell their labor at this cost. All employers have to pay, I don't know what the first minimum national $5 an hour will say. I don't know exactly what the number was, but employers have to pay at least $5 an hour. And so now you have these employers that are like, okay, well, I can't hire the black kid at $4 an hour, which he was willing to work for. No, there was a voluntary exchange, but I can't do that. That's illegal now. So I either hire the black kid at 4 or at 5, or I hire the white guy at 5. I'll go with the white guy. Now, you might say that's racist, whatever, but it had to do with the potential competition. And back then, it could have quite well been racism, that you could have a racist employer. But nonetheless, that's what ends up happening. And we see that even in today's world, that still applies. You, as someone who maybe didn't, so let's say you didn't have the opportunity to go to a good high school or a good college. You could go to an employer and be like, look, I will do this job because I want the on-the-job training, so I'll do it below minimum wage, right? I'll do it for $7 an hour. Whereas normally you would have to pay someone $10.50. And that employer, profit margin makes sense for them to take a risk at you then at $7 an hour. If you then get on the job training or prove your competency, then now you could move up and you end up being more successful after 2-3 years than you ever would have in the world of minimum wage, because with the minimum wage, you would have never got hired in the first place. They would have went with the person with the higher experience than you or the higher job than you. Now, people say, yeah, but then you end up in this situation where people are getting paid 50 cents an hour. No, you wouldn't, because who's going to take that job? The problem is we have minimum wage laws, and then you also, in addition to that, have all of these social welfare programs. So it allows a company like Walmart then to pay less than they actually would. They have to at least meet the minimum wage, but people are willing to work at Walmart for less than they otherwise would because they know they get things like food stamps and things like that. So now our tax money is subsidizing Walmart paying their employees less than they otherwise would have to. Because otherwise you'd be like, I'm not going to work at Walmart if I can't afford to live based on working at Walmart. You wouldn't do it. And so people's mutual, and then there's other things that factor into this, right? So your power as labor is the more people you have willing to fill a job, that increases the supply, so the demand goes down. And when demand falls, the less it costs. So that works both when you're selling your labor or when you're selling a product. So if there's increased demand for your, whatever you're making, widget, you're making this widget, right? there's an increased demand for it, you could raise the cost of it. Makes sense. But if no one wants to buy your widget, what do? You lower the cost of your widget. If you're selling your labor or how much you're willing to work for, and there's not many people that have your skill set or are willing to do that job, you could demand a higher price for your labor. But if there's tons of people capable and that are willing to apply for that job, then your value of your labor significantly declines. So what does this have to do? The same people pushing this minimum wage are people who are pushing for increased illegal immigration and immigration in general, particularly low-skilled immigration. That increases competition for these jobs, which then means that the people that have lower education and lower skill sets that didn't have the best access to education are now the ones most hurt by the illegal immigration, which is minority communities, which is why Trump was absolutely right in the State of the Union to talk about how this illegal immigration actually affects minority communities and communities that didn't traditionally have access to the higher education standards. That's why Republicans and Democrats haven't done anything about illegal immigration for so long. They like it. And not only do they like it, they don't even have to pay these people the minimum wage because they're not supposed to be here legally. So it's a win-win for the businesses. They get out of the minimum wage law that they didn't want, and the labor goes up. The amount of people that want the labor goes up. Now, another thing about minimum wage is, like a $15 minimum wage, I live in a little town called Freiburg. There's a mom and pop grocery shop down the street, and we just got a Dollar General. Let's say the minimum wage becomes $15 an hour. That grocery shop will be out of business within a month. They could barely, they're not operating the business because they're making big money. They're operating the business because they're retired and they're basically breaking even. They do it because they like it. They like providing employment to people that want to work there. They like breaking even. They like keeping busy and doing it. They like meeting the people. They like providing a good service to people. But they're not getting rich off it. If they have to start losing money because instead of paying people $10 an hour, they now have to pay them $15 an hour, they'll close the doors. Now, Dollar General won't be happy down the street that they have to pay $15 an hour instead of whatever they're paying now, $10 an hour or something. But once their competition's gone, okay, we'll pay the $15 an hour to our employers and we'll raise the price on everything. And what are you going to do? There's nowhere else to go in this town now. So now milk, the price goes up slightly. The big corporations don't mind these laws because they know they're not going to lose the money at the end of the day. Their competitors that are smaller are going to be more effective. And this, what you have to understand, minimum wage is a regulation. It is a big one. It's an obvious one. But this is true of regulations in general. Regulations always hurt smaller businesses more than bigger businesses. So take farming. You can have, let's say, and this is obviously an oversimplification, but let's just say there's 100 pages of paperwork a month you have to do to operate a farm. So you have one farm that's operated by Tyson Chicken that employs 1,000 people at this farm. You could hire 5 people just to do those 100 pages of paperwork, no problem. That's 5 out of your 1,000 employees. Now, that same 100 pages of paperwork needs to be done by this mom and pop farm down the road that has a mom, a dad, and 2 kids working at. They also have to do 100 pages of paperwork. How do they do it? That's the problem with these regulations. Even though the big businesses ultimately want less regulations, they understand that in the short term, though the regulations might hurt them, in the long term, it ends up benefiting them because it weeds out the competition. And we've seen this with farming. The family farm is a dying thing in America. They're being gobbled up by these big farms because the regulations are so odious that the average family farm can't keep up with them. You have to basically be running as a corporation and have specialized people lawyers that are just dealing with the paperwork. People that are just doing inventory like accountants. You need those people to be able to run because the regulations have become so ridiculous. And I'm hoping to get a farmer on this channel to talk specifically about it. I've talked to several of them. The idea is and it's not even just the government. For example, one of the biggest seed producers in the country is Monsanto. Monsanto sells what's called Terminator seeds. Terminator seeds were genetically modified to basically not be fertile. So what's all this mean? You plant corn, right? Let's just take corn. You could take the seeds from corn and replant them again the next year. Monsanto has found a way to make those seeds only fertile for one generation. So if you take this corn that grows and try to plant those seeds, they won't grow. Some farmers found ways to get around that. Monsanto has literally came in with governments to search people's farms to make sure they're not messing with these seeds. And that's legal. Like, that's happened, and they've been able to sue small farmers for big bucks. But it's not just that. The government does a lot of this. For example, pesticide usage. You have to mark down all the pesticides you use. The government's allowed to come in at any time, weigh your pesticides, measure them to make sure the exact amount matches up with the paperwork that you use. You have to have every field located, how many seeds you put in every field. Everything has to match up. The government's allowed to come in and look at any time. There's tons of things. Now, it used to just be the free market. If you were... But granted, we need regulations to say that you can't poison people and things like that, but it goes so far beyond that. Then you have things called cleaning. Like, once you start to get subsidies involved in the mix, you have all types of craziness that comes up. Like, you had what was called clean and green, and that was special loans that were afforded to farmers if they signed an agreement that they would meet such production for so many years. So maybe you got low interest loans because you want to be a farmer to get this equipment because you're a milk farmer. Then you decide 7 years after farming, like, I can't do this anymore. I got some kind of sickness. I can't afford to, my farm doesn't make enough money to pay a helping hand to come in. And so I can't run the farm, so I want to sell my equipment. The government comes in and tells you, you can't. You've agreed to produce X amount of milk for 20 years, and it's only been 7. So now you have to pay those loans back. And not only do you have to pay them back, you have to pay them back at this crazy interest rate because you no longer qualify. So you basically have to keep working your fingers to the bone. Or you could sell your farm to a factory farm. And that's what ends up happening. That's what these regulations do. Minimum wage is no different. It places odious burdens on small income places, small businesses, and ends up benefiting the big business. Why is that important? Because the entire idea of pushing the minimum wage is designed to help poor people in the small business and be more of a burden on the bigger business. And it has, as oftentimes is the case, the exact opposite effect. Milton Friedman, I wish I had the quote, but he says something effective: beware the well-intentioned beware the well-intentioned do-gooder who knows better than you, because that's when the real problems start. You know, there are people that legitimately push this because they don't want people to be poor. I have the same, and this is something I was talking about to my friend who would identify more as socialist. Like, we don't like each other's political ideologies, but we recognize the same problems that we're trying to solve. If it was up to both of us, because we're decent people, we don't want anyone to be poor. We want everyone to be healthy. We want everyone to be happy. We want everyone to, we don't want disease. We don't want war. We don't want conflict. That's what you want. It's just you disagree with how to get there. I think his solution would make all that stuff worse. He thinks my solution would make all that stuff worse. But we could come together on saying we're not crappy people. We just have vastly different ideas from how to get there. So there's no need to hate, or to, I'm not going to be your friend or something like that. We just disagree, So yeah, I'm against the minimum wage. The other thing is, like, the company I work for, I live in Freiburg. My cost of living is substantially lower than my company's based out of around the Pittsburgh area. So a lot of people that work in my company work in Pittsburgh. So even if they make the same amount of money as me, they're like, this isn't doable. I can't live off this money because I live in downtown Pittsburgh. I, on the other hand, live comfortably, not wealthy or anything, but I'm not struggling to put a roof over my head or pay bills. I'm not missing at many meals, as you maybe can tell. And the reason is because I live in an area where the cost of living is so much less. So when we have these overreaching policies that's just like, minimum wage is flat everywhere, like Pennsylvania would be seeking to do, it doesn't work. You end up harming small businesses here, and you're going to push for incentive for all types of things. Like, it was the same with Obamacare. I remember saying this when Obamacare came out, because if you read the legislation carefully, it was like employers are provided to provide XYZ for employees that work over 30 hours a week. I said, very first thing is every single major employer is going to be like, okay, you work 25 hours a week. There, now we don't meet this. We'll just hire more people. So then, now you're only getting 25 hours a week. You're still not qualified for this healthcare. So you got to make up the difference. So you get another job where you're working 25 hours a week. And now instead of getting, because you're working 50 hours a week, instead of getting 10 hours of overtime, which you originally would have been entitled to, you're not getting that. You have to have 2 jobs, neither of which will be willing to hire you full-time because of that. That's what happens. So what happens when we see in places like Seattle where they implemented this $15 an hour minimum wage, it was designed to help fast food workers and people like that. What ended up happening is they started replacing people with electronic kiosks. They started cutting people's hours and hiring more people. They started doing all kinds of things like that, cutting back, demanding employees do more and firing some employees. And so it ended up that it was actually net worse, even though some individuals ended up making more. It was net worse for most individuals that were in those positions that were making less than the $15 an hour because their hours got cut, or they just straight got laid off, or they were replaced by innovative technology and things like that. Let's see what you got here. I mean, but again, like, I don't want the government intervening saying a company must pay their employees so much of a percentage of what the CEO is getting or something like that. That's not the government's role, right? Oftentimes we could say it's a joke. Like, you could flat out see it. Like, you'll see a company that, like, does terrible, loses tons of money, and then the CEO walks away with millions of dollars. Like, that sucks, right? And I get it. Like, you're saying, like, a ratio of 1,000 to 1. But why is that the government's role? The employees know that. The employee has every right to be like, I don't like how much the CEO's making. I'm done. You only pay me a small percentage. If enough employees did that, then the situation would resolve itself. Once we say that the government can come in and say, no, CEOs can only make so much of a higher percentage than the people that are the baseline employees of theirs, then that's a huge infringement that has the power for abuse. The first thing that would happen is real wealthy CEOs would find ways to lobby people to get out of this. And they wouldn't be put. We already have laws on the book that talk about how things like corruption are bad. We don't enforce them. So now we're just going to, this is what we do with gun laws, right? It's the same thing. We make these gun laws, and then law-abiding citizens follow the gun laws. And then a certain percent of people break those laws. And then we don't do anything with the people that break the laws. And then people say, you know, we need more laws. Okay, so we pass more laws that the law-abiding people follow. And then the law-breaking people, again, don't follow. So instead of saying, well, we need government to enforce new laws that say how much CEOs can make as a percentage of what the average employee makes. Sorry, that sunlight's brutal. Instead, what we should do is just enforce corruption laws we already have and make it clear. Let people educate people on how much these CEOs are making and things like that. And here's another thing. Like, there's this demonization of the idea of CEOs and things like that. A lot of them suck. Don't get me wrong. A lot of them were either engaged in unethical practices or criminal practices. But a lot of CEOs and stuff don't have personal lives. They're working like 20 hours a week. They're constantly traveling, working, doing this, doing that. And I know people are like, that's a joke. But it's true. Like, it's absolutely true. Most people don't want that. Again, like, you look at lawyers and stuff. Why aren't there so many women in law firms? And I've seen many people talk about this. Women are just as capable. They're just as competent and as intelligent, like at law firms. What ends up happening, though, is this. You have these women that come out of law school, and they're just phenomenal. They're just crushing it. Better than most of their male counterparts. You know, they're great. And they're going to make partner in their law firm. But the problem is, once you make partner, you're working like 20 hours a day. You basically can't have a family. And a lot of these women make enough money on their way up there. They're like, I'm 30. I want a family. There's more to life than just money. So they say, nah, I don't want to be partner. And so they take a lesser position, working far less hours, because they want to have a family life and have a social life. Those people, by the way, on the most index scales, are overwhelmingly more happy than like the CEOs and stuff. A lot of these CEOs and stuff are like psychotic, like they're sociopaths. Like it's because it takes a brutal person to put in that much of a portion of your life into this. So we're just to say, like, nah, sorry, you can't get this money. There is. I don't want to see the government involved in that. I think that it's a slippery slope. I mean, the taxing, you could say that, like that's a potential. I don't think income should be taxed at all. Personally, I would be more for a universal sales tax or some kind of flat tax rate. But the idea of taxing income is not a good one to me. A universal sales tax seems to make more sense because, okay, you're taxing money that's being spent. That's fine. And so wealthier people will spend more money and therefore they'll pay more taxes. But the taxing income, like that just seems crazy. You get your income tax, and then when you spend the money, you get taxed. It's getting taxed twice. So, how do you solve this? Like, what do you do to solve this? People need to engage in free will. Don't work for a company that does that. Don't buy products from a company that does that. And I know that sounds stupid, but that's the reality. I value personal freedom, right? That's what it's like Braveheart. That's what makes life worth living. I don't want my mom telling me, hey, no, you're not allowed to make this much money. And you give some of your money to your brother and you do this and that. I don't need that. Let us make personal decisions. And things aren't as bad as it seems, by the way. Like we get all this negative news. Like people are just like, it's worse than it's ever been. It's not. I mean, the numbers it's actually unbelievable. Something like since 1996, half of the people that live below in desperate poverty have been lifted out of that. And that's people that couldn't afford a meal a day. Now, does it mean we still don't have very far to go? Of course we do. I mean, this is one of the craziest statistics I've ever heard. The viability, what's the word I'm looking? Natal health, there's a way to say this and I'm at a loss right now, but infant mortality, and a mother's mortality giving birth. In sub-Saharan Africa, the poorest countries in Africa, infant mortality rates are today what they were in Britain and the United Kingdom in 1970. That means Britain, first world country, right? Their infant mortality rates in 1970 are what the infant mortality rates are in the poorest countries in the world right now. That is an amazing achievement made possible by innovation, free trade, free markets, capitalism. That's what's led to that technology and that innovation that led that. Now, yes, the wealth disparity of the richest getting rich is that gap is increasing. But again, I always say this, and that's important and it needs addressed. That's where when Peterson's talking about the need to say that sometimes hierarchies get out of control, there is a point where the haves have so much, and it's not necessarily the have-nots, but the have-lesses have so much less that it becomes a problem on its own. But would you rather have a system where you have this big gap and the poor are here and the wealthy are way up here? I'm trying to do the full screen. Or would you rather that gap shrink like in Venezuela by taking the poor down here and the wealthy down here? Now the gap's real small, but everybody got poorer, even the poor. See, the poor in this country, and this isn't totally a capitalist system. I advocate for more freedom, more free markets in most cases. But the poor in this country, if we're really honest, what it means to fall in that line of poverty, smartphones, PlayStations, Xboxes. That's not what it means to be poor in other areas of the world. We have an obesity problem with poor people. But the way you hear it talked by these people that complain about capitalism, this is it. It's just the end. The system's so screwed up. These wealthy people are making so much. And it's yes, that is a problem that needs to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed by us as individuals. The government coming in and regulating isn't necessarily going to solve it. What it can solve is when criminal actions are taken by the wealthy, they're held to the fullest extent of the law, and we stop giving out corporate welfare, like bailing out banks that failed. If we stop that, then the cream will rise to the top. Banks that actually, or whatever wealthy company that would have been bailed out, people that could do it more competently will realize the profit incentive and start to fill that role, and the corruption will end. If you start actually punishing these wealthy people that are breaking the laws for financial incentive, and I don't mean slap on the wrist fines, I mean real jail time, 10 years prison, something like that. I had a friend that said capital punishment, start hanging people from lamp poles. I'm not going that far, but you get the idea. You're one of these people. It's well, why not gamble? Why not break the law? What's the worst could happen? I get in trouble, slap on the wrist, bam, I'm back to work the next day. That's how we could start to end this profit margin. And the other thing is, we need to tell, just because someone's wealthy, it's not just, what is the problem with people with extreme wealth? Because you kind of get a mixed message. On one hand, you have people being well, they're like Scrooge McDuck. They just got this big vault with gold in it, and they're swimming around in it and hoarding all this money. But on the other hand, you're look at these CEOs. They went out and they bought yachts and stuff like that. Well, what's the problem? Is saving money the problem? Because I think there's a good argument to be had that we need more savers. We have too many borrowers. I think that's a huge problem. Or is spending the money on frivolous things the problem? But how many people did that yacht were employed to make that yacht? Once he bought it, that money got dispersed to laborers and people that own that company and things like that. So we have to ask ourselves, we still live in a system where it's something like 70% of our taxes are paid by the top 5%. Now you might say that's deserved. They make that much money. They should be paying it. Okay, fair enough. But we should acknowledge that at least. If you're extremely wealthy, most of these people aren't just sitting on the money. Most of it have companies where they're paying people. Those people are voluntarily agreeing to work with them. If the government wasn't backing up Walmart with food stamps and things like that, the people wouldn't voluntarily work for them. If we weren't importing 20 million illegals that are willing to do all kinds of jobs, then those jobs would have more, like people always say, well, illegals do the jobs that Americans aren't willing to do. Well, yes, because Americans aren't willing to do them at that wage. So, agricultural work, like working on fruit farms or something like that, it's brutal work. I worked on a Christmas tree patch, trimming trees and stuff. I didn't even do the hardest labor there. Like there were people that had to dig these trees all day and drag them. That's rough, but we swung machetes, trimming the trees, or use we called them long handles, or use shears. It was a pain. It was tough work. And, it wasn't worth the money. There was a lot of like people getting paid under the table. I did it as a teenager, before football season started. But that's brutal work. But if you were paying $20 an hour, man, people would have been there like, all right, I'll do this. The problem is these farmers, the way that it's been set up, they make a profit because they get an unfair competitive advantage by being able to hire illegals, which they know that they could pay less than what their competitors would otherwise pay. So therefore, based on that influx of labor, now the demand of the labor has been gone down. So the bargaining power of the laborer goes down. So now we can afford to only pay $3 an hour to some illegal and no American will do it. By the way, the illegal immigration argument is a very interesting one. Oftentimes, I have a problem when people try to argue, and again, I'm biased, so I think this comes predominantly from the left. People try to take a moral superiority issue when they're talking about issues. So like climate change or healthcare or illegal immigration. There's always this idea of like this moral superiorness. And oftentimes when people are making that argument, if you really then listen to them, they'll out themselves that it's not just a morality argument, that there's also a financial or something. And those arguments often don't jive with each other. So I find that there's kind of this immoral argument that comes with illegal immigration. If you leave people talk, they'll give you the conflicting arguments. For one hand, they'll say like, well, morally, these people should be here, and they're hardworking, great people that are willing to do jobs that Americans want, and they deserve to be here. That's a great thing. And the next argument, they'll be like, if you kick those people out, do you know how much the price of your produce would go up? It would go through the roof. Is that what you want? Can you imagine, like, go to your supermarket, all these prices through the roof? It's like, oh, so what you're really saying is, for your benefit, for cheap produce, you want these people to get paid $1 an hour. That's what you're really saying, right? And then they'll say, oh, no. I actually wish those people, they should be getting paid minimum wage. They should be getting paid. All the laws, they should have to, they should have to, be getting paid. I wish they were getting paid $15 an hour. And then the counter to that's like, okay, then the price of produce goes up, right? So what you're literally saying is they should be treated just as American citizens. Well, then they'd be unwilling to do the work, wouldn't they? Unless you paid them a competitive wage, which proves your original premise that they're doing work that Americans are unwilling to do is basically the same argument that was used for slave labor. Oh, they're better off anyways. 3 meals and a roof over their head. They're doing better than they would have in their country. Plus, look at all the cheap goods we get out of it. Yeah, that's immoral, right? How about we don't have the illegals here and we force these companies to pay a living wage to all the people, Americans that would really do the job. Or, and this is what Milton Friedman says, we have no welfare system at all, period, and anyone who wants to come to this country to work is allowed. That's acceptable as well. So if you show, and it's not just no welfare for immigrants, it's no welfare, period. And so then what happens is the people that are willing to work stay, the people that aren't willing to work leave because they can't make a go of it here. They're not getting free food. They're not getting free stuff. But you don't think the Democrats would ever push for that? They're not going to end social welfare systems. And we do need some social welfare systems. But you see the idea. If you're going to have these systems, it's impossible then, once you then allow illegal immigration to come in. Now it screws up the entire system. So, that's what's going on there. I might end here shortly. I got some other things I was going to talk about, but anyone particular want me to talk about? Am I missing anything in the chat? Yeah, I know, Jesse, the tree patch sucked, right? One of the things I always say working at that tree farm, and my brother that's on here knows this, it motivated you to get your act together. You didn't want. I felt that like everyone that considered dropping out of high school, they should like take a crappy job like that and be like, cool, you could drop out, no questions asked, but you have to complete 80 hours at this crappy job, whatever it might be in your particular area. So for us, go to the tree farm. It's like, this is what you're going to be doing the rest of your life. And then I bet 2 weeks later, most people be like, you know what? I'll get that degree. Screw this, Oh, you wanted to talk about Pelosi clapping and smirking. Well, yeah, I mean, the State of the Union, and I've heard other people say this since the State of the Union as well. But this was my initial thought as well. That's Pelosi doing that and the ladies high-fiving themselves. Here's my take in general on this, right? Look, the State of the Union, the pomp and circumstance of it, I find to be ridiculous. The stand up, sit down, applaud for this, blah, blah, blah. If the Democrats would not have applauded anything, I would not, and you would have seen, just like you're seeing now, people saying, oh, they didn't applaud for minority unemployment and blah, blah, blah. And I would have said, I get it, though. They weren't applauding for anything because they don't want to give Trump credit for anything. Now, the caveat to this is everyone's always going to applaud for the Holocaust survivor, the cancer survivor. I get that. That's clearly, we all understand that's different. But I'm talking about the policies or the achievements. If they wouldn't have applauded for anything, that was fine. I think that just shows, it's not saying we don't care about minority unemployment or whatever the issue is. It's saying we're just not going to applaud for Trump. Okay, childish, stupid, whatever. That's fine. The problem is when you do applaud for some certain policies, now it's like, okay, so clearly you're willing to applaud for some things. So it makes it stand out the things that you're not applauding for. And so here's some things that weren't applauded for. ICE arresting sex traffickers, 300 women being freed from sex traffickers, minority unemployment at record lows, and things like the idea of working together as America instead of as a party to compromise. None of that was applauded by the majority of these Democrats. What was applauded? Well, when they started talking about women employment. So it was worth applauding women employment, but not minority employment. Okay. And then what was the biggest applause? What was all the smirking and stuff? What was that about? The high-fiving each other, the chanting. About themselves. You got elected. Woo! We did it. Not worth applauding the sex traffickers being arrested or the 300 women that were freed from sex trafficking. That's not worth the applause. But me winning a congressional seat, yeah, high five, woo. It's selfish, it's childish. And the fact that so many in the media use this to attack Trump. Oh, Trump stepped in it. He didn't realize when he said that it was mostly women or Democrats that were these women. Oh, they got him. Of course he realized that. Trump was doing what he should have been doing, which is you have to be conciliatory when you're trying to compromise and bring people. It's another reason that I'll be a good congressperson. No one likes a bragger, particularly when you're giving a speech like that. You could talk yourself up and talk your policies up, but you're also trying to encourage voters. You're not just encouraging your base. You're trying to encourage people from the other party or predominantly those in the middle that haven't made up their mind. And so one of the best ways you could seem like a more reasonable person, even if you're BSing, is to say, my opponents also have done good things. We need to work together, right? I learned this in debate. One of the big problems, again, I was successful in debate. One of the reasons I was successful was I wasn't the smartest person. I had trouble keeping up with people, all kinds of things. A lot of people had way more technical skills than me in a lot of things. But something I realized was you have a human judge. And people wanted to act like they won every argument, right? So you would debate someone and they'd be like, we win this, we win this, we win this. Our opponent's dumb. And then I would stand up and be like, I have to hand it to my opponents. I think they did a heck of a job here, here, and here, and they're really smart. They got some good points. But I think I win this issue, and here's why this issue is the most important. And judges eat that up. They're like, yes, because it makes you seem like a reasonable, real person. And so Trump's doing that's when I was on my buddy Drone Tech show, and I was like, they were like, what do you want to see out of the State of the Union? And I said, I want to see him push for the wall. I want to see him bring up these terrible abortion laws. I want to see him talk about the economy. But when he's pushing the wall and the economy and things like that, he needs to be reaching out to people in the center. And the best way to do that is to say, minority groups, here's why my economy's been good for you. The wall, here's why it's good for minority groups. All these demographics that weren't voting for Trump or that he had low numbers, he needs to make inroads in. And so strategically and morally, it makes sense to talk to that crowd because this is his chance to talk to the people without the media saying Trump's Hitler, Trump's a Nazi, Trump's a racist, blah, 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 blah. So he gets to talk directly to the people, and that's a very good thing. And so he rightfully was conciliatory in a lot of things. The Democrats work with me to pass this. This is good for minorities. He's saying all the right things. And then he even says, Trump even was good at riffing, because people will say, yeah, anyone can sound good reading a speech. Well, no, that's not true. Not anyone can. But you're right. He probably didn't write that. But even like the riffs he said, like when they sang happy birthday and he was like, hey, they wouldn't have sang that for me. Like, it's funny. It's a funny joke that's self-denigrating. It makes him seem like a more reasonable person. Compare that to Pelosi. How's she look? Now, we're supposed to believe that the one side's noble, moral, great people that are just there for good governance, and they didn't want the shutdown. They're trying to work with the other party. And then Trump's this terrible, scowling, horrible creature that's unwilling to work with anyone. Everything going into this leading up with the wall and the government shutdown has shown Trump's at least tried to negotiate, at least tried to compromise somewhat with the Democrats. The Democrats have said not $1. The wall is immoral. That's what they said. So which side's trying to compromise? And that, these women celebrating themselves, chiding Trump, sneering at him, the way they're applauding, for him being conciliatory to them, saying, congratulations, there's so many women here. Now, which side looks more rude? Which side looks more childish? But the media thought, oh, that's a big win. That's a big win for Pelosi. She put Trump in his place. Imagine if it was the other way. Imagine if it was Obama, right? And, who would have been speaker then? Was it McConnell? No, but whoever. Imagine the speaker's like, yeah, Obama. People would have, well, that's racist. That would have been the first thing you would have heard. But how rude. That's the commander-in-chief. You show him some respect. So yeah, I mean, that entire thing was stupid. Trump's State of the Union was the best speech I've heard him give. It was fantastic. There were only a couple down points. He shouldn't have mentioned the investigations into him. Just makes him look defensive. Leave other people talk about the investigations. Leave me to hire me. I'll talk about it. The investigations are a witch hunt. They're terrible, but he shouldn't be out there. It just makes him look defensive. So shouldn't have said that. The North Korea thing, like, he's great. He's great to harp on that. That's a great thing he's done. He's trying to do there. And he's right that the other party and even people in his own party were like, no, you can't talk to this guy. I think that's an incredible achievement. Even if it doesn't work out, you should try to talk to your enemies. Political solutions are always better than military solutions, and you should always try them. Military should be a last resort. So I'd like that. But the fact that he was like, we'd be in a war if it wasn't for me. I don't know about that. But other than that, the speech was really good. His riffs were good. That where he was flying off the cuff, he was funny, and he was again self-depreciating. That's important. Trump would be so much more likable if he could take a joke. Let me tell you who's doing it well. Here's a congressperson for you to follow. Dan Crenshaw is his name. He's a Republican. I forget where he was elected out of, but he has an eye patch. SNL made fun of him when he was running. The one guy said that he looked like a porn star, a Bond villain or something. And there was a big push against this SNL guy, like, how dare you make fun of a veteran? He lost his eye in war. And I defended that SNL guy. I was like, look, it's a joke. Clearly he wasn't trying to say, but there was a big push. And so this SNL guy the next week's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make fun of veterans. And then who comes on? This very guy he was making fun of, Crenshaw. And he had a good sense of humor about it. I've said forever, that's how Trump should be about this stuff, Instead of like, 2 scoops of ice cream, they're running with that story over and over and over. And Trump comes out, it's like, this is how fake the media is. Trump should have just like came out to the next press conference with like 2 scoops of ice cream. Like, yeah, and just joked about it. Yeah, you're right. I'm kind of a meathead. And that's kind of what he's doing. Like, oh, they wouldn't have clapped for me. They wouldn't have cheered happy birthday. That's good. That's self-depreciating. That's good. That's good Trump. That's the Trump that's more likable. His policies, most of his policies are very good. He's a very unlikable person, though. And it gives the media red meat to go out and push like, oh, he's unlikable and his policies suck. That's not true. The economy's doing well. Most Americans probably like most of the stuff that he's pushing for. But because it's him, and you'll see this, right? You'll see people, conservative people like on YouTube and stuff will go to a college campus and they'll start reading like achievements that Trump did, but say it was Obama and be like, what do you think of this? And they're like, oh yeah, that's great. Obama did great. And they're like, actually, that was Trump. Oh, or they'll read like quotes from Obama and act like it's Trump. And their people are like, this is racist. This is terrible. And it's like, well, actually it was Obama that said that. Oh, So, yeah, Crenshaw is from Texas. You're right. So yeah, that I thought the State of the Union went really well. And one thing I'll say real briefly, this is probably the last thing I'll talk about. the fact checking on the State of the Union. Now, I did this, remember a month or two ago where Trump did a big speech about the border wall and why it was important? If you go back and you look at my speeches about, or my videos about that, I talked about the idea of fact checking the fact checkers. There's something wrong with humans. There's something wrong with us where we'll hear an impressive title and we're like, oh, so fact checker. Well, the fact checker said it, so they must be right. The problem is you ought to fact check the fact checker, because oftentimes now they're not fact checking. They're partisans. Fact checking seems to be a simple job. Person says X, you look at the facts and say, that's true or that's not true or that's partially true. But instead it's became inserting things and interpreting. So, for example, here was one of the fact checks that I believe the New York Times ran. Trump said that one out of 3 illegal women trying to cross the border are involved in some sort of sexual assault. And that PolitiFact said that's only partially true, because the numbers show 31%. 1 in 3 is 33%. So it's like, what? Like, that's so nitpicky. Or you'll have them say things like, Trump said that politicians, this is the last fact check. This is the big one I thought was hilarious. Well, Trump said that the politicians live behind walls, and clearly he was referring to Obama, but Obama has a fence, not a wall, so that's false. Well, one, a fence is the same type of idea. Second, he didn't say Obama, he said politicians, so the fact that you assumed he meant Obama and then said that that's incorrect is absurd. And they do this over and over. There was a fact checker that said, Trump said about the Jewish Holocaust survival that he thought that the American troops were sent from heaven, but Jewish people don't believe in heaven. That's not true. And it's just like, these fact checkers are just inserting their own politics, into things. And then saying, well, we inserted our opinion of what we think he meant, and that's not true. And it's ridiculous. That's the job of these fact checkers. Right, exactly. And White Sismel, good name. Right, and this is what people have said all the while. People that like Trump take what he says, they take the larger idea of what he says and look at that, and they don't take him literally. The people that dislike Trump take him literally, but they don't look at the larger context of what he's saying. And so, like I was talking about Sweden, yeah, I'll talk about U.S. Israel in a second here. They talk about Sweden, the situation, right? Like I was talking about earlier, where Trump literally was wrong when he said there was an attack last night in Sweden by Islamic refugees. So they were just like, he's wrong, and that proves everything he's talking about is wrong. But in the grander context, he is right that there are attacks, like grenade attacks are way up and things like that. So his supporters are like, and the truth is, there is a middle ground where you can say literally he's wrong, but in the greater context, he's right. And that's yeah. And then 2 nights later, exactly. So that's the problem. The media, and it's a double standard. That's also the problem. It's like, okay, if you're going to, and here's what I've said about the media in general, right? I don't so much mind that they're difficult on Trump. Now, it gets over the top. Don't get me wrong. Like, some of the stories are just ridiculous, but you do want a journalism and press that is tough on the president or whoever's in power. You want that. The problem's the double standard. They weren't like that with Obama. That's what's ridiculous. And so you have this crazy situation where the media will stand up in almost a unified voice and say, Trump kicked Jim Acosta out of a White House press conference. This is an attack on the free press. This is terrible. And it's like, yeah, he kicked Acosta out for being a buffoon. He deserved to be kicked out. Meanwhile, the press raised far less of a stink when Obama actually wiretapped the family of James Rosen, a Fox News correspondent that was writing articles critical of him. But where was the press then? That's the kind of ridiculous. The press correctly doesn't report when the lieutenant governor of Virginia, Justin Fairfax, is accused of sexual assault. They can't corroborate the claim, so they don't publish the story. Okay. When it was Kavanaugh, they ran any trash they could. That's what's ridiculous. That it's the double standard. You don't mind a hard-hitting press. You mind when they're soft on the other side. Because then it turns out, and then they're being hard-hitting in ways that don't even make sense, like 2 scoops of ice cream, or they're just making crap up. And that's what's ridiculous. That's why they're just a mouthpiece for the establishment Democratic Party. So, let's see. U.S.-Israel relations. Yeah, it's right. Like U.S.-Israel relations are complicated. Let me phrase it this way. I've always said this since I've become, like, I guess I started off kind of conspiratorial in politics, and I still am to a sense. But by conspiratorial, I just mean that there's like agendas going on behind the scenes, and that's certainly true. Like the deep state conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy to understand that lobbyists, businesses, unelected officials, and the establishment people in the politics have undue influence over the direction of the country. That's what I mean by deep state. Not that there's a bunch of people sitting in a smoky room, pushing a button with who dies or something. I'm not saying that at all. It's not even that sophisticated, They make mistakes, as is shown by the Mueller investigation. So one of the things I always said, though, is if you turn on Fox News and you turn on CNN and they agree about something, that should trouble you, right? And so you see that with like Trump and his Syria approach. The only time that the Democratic news sources are praising Trump's when he's bombing Syria. That's the only time they're like, finally, he's presidential. And then as soon as he was like, hey, we should pull out of Afghanistan and Syria, you saw Republicans and Democrats on Fox, CNN, and politicians were like, this is terrible. His intel officials say that's terrible. That's like things that worry me. It's like, no, I'm with you. So with the Israel situation, for years it seemed like no one would criticize Israel. But now it's like the opposite, where you have like, you can't even have like an Israeli speaker on campuses anymore. Right? And Palestine can do no wrong. And the UN's always crapping on Israel, like Israel's uniquely the worst country in the world. And Palestine's this great. They're the victims. And it's kind of this identity politics mashup. I think the truth's somewhere in between. I think that Israel has done bad things, just like the United States has, as most countries do. And they're certainly more powerful than Palestine. But they're also justified in a lot, at least, of their acting back. They are being attacked all the time and things like that. I thought Trump was right to want to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And the reason is we recognize them as a sovereign country, and that country says our capital is this city. That is a city located within their country. And so we should recognize that that's the capital. I don't see a problem with that. The argument that, if you do that, then a bunch of Palestinians and Hamas will attack people. Okay, then the bad people are Hamas and the Palestinians. However, AIPAC, which is the kind of the lobbyist group behind Israel, is one of the most influential lobbyist groups in this country. And historically, we've ended up in a lot of conflicts and selling arms and engaged in a lot of like black ops on behalf of Israel, which we have no business undertaking. I think we could defend Israel as it's a democracy there. I think that it is without question people of other faiths that exist in Israel are treated far better than Jewish people are treated in the other countries of different faiths. I think that's unquestionable. You don't really see stories of Islamic people in Israel being bullied and treated terribly by the government. They have freedom to access all of the religious monuments in there. Now, does that mean that all of Israel's foreign policy and trying to get more land and stuff's good? No, but we should look at it as a case-by-case basis. There's this push to just be like, Israel's evil or Israel's never wrong. And I think it's far more nuanced than that. I believe in kind of the founding fathers' idea, trade with everyone, alliances with no one. We should not be Israel's weapon. We shouldn't be. We should not be involved in these conflicts in the Middle East. And I think that that's a mistake. We should not be dogpiling and being like the Jewish state, ignore when countries say the Jewish state doesn't have the right to exist. We actually have people in Congress saying that, like Omar, Tlaib or whatever said that. That's also wrong. So we should recognize Israel's more of an ally than someplace like Iran. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be staying in Syria just to help Israel. I'm against that. So it's a very nuanced thing. I think too many people want to just take a singular approach. Do everything Israel wants and they're always the best, they're great, or Israel's always wrong, screw them. And I don't think that that's the correct approach. My overarching approach, though, is this. We do not go to war. We do not bomb people for no reason. I'm tired of these regime change wars. And if Israel says, hey, we want you to, attack this country, we should not do that. We should be looking out for our defense. We should not be bombing people unless we have credible intelligence that it is to directly protect the United States, not our allies. If someone attacks Israel and we decide because they've been physically attacked to go help Israel, that's one thing. But preemptively striking other countries on Israel's whim, I'm totally against. So that's where I stand on that. What claims are you talking about here? I agree basically with what you're saying on it. Israel operates pretty good as a country, but that doesn't mean that we should be fighting wars on their behalf. So there's good and bad with it. So and there's so much propaganda, there's so much influence, and that's one of the problems with like we could tie this back into the whole Mueller. I have to go in like 5 minutes, by the way. I got to pick my wife up at work. So another bad thing, like stirring the soup. The problem is when you when I'm doing these live streams, I can't really tell my wife like, yeah, I did laundry all day. Like she could just go and check. So I got to make sure I pick her up. So but it goes back to like what we see with the Mueller investigation, this idea that they're prosecuting, one of the things they're prosecuting people for is FARA violations, which is failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. If you're allowed to lobby for a foreign country, but you have to have the proper paperwork so it's noticed to everyone. Hey, I'm here on behalf of the Ukraine or Pakistan or Israel or Russia or the UK, whatever, ally, enemy, neutral, it doesn't matter. You have to register that you're lobbying for them. The problem is we have this selective enforcement. So on one hand, I don't mind that they're charging Manafort for this because it is a huge freaking problem. Do you have any idea how much our politicians are influenced, how much backhand money and deals they're getting by these foreign countries? And so many of our political operatives don't have their constituents' best interests in mind when they're making votes. They actually have the best interest of these other countries that they're being lobbied for. The problem is, though, and so people are like, finally, Manafort went down. Maybe we'll start to see foreign influence be taken out. The biggest offender of this is China. China has so much influence. It's ridiculous. So the notification to be able to kiss your ass, that's fine. That'd be a good t-shirt. Anyway, so we do need to like out this foreign lobbies. And a lot of this is like, I talked to my friend about it, like a lot of like money in politics. That's another issue, or foreign lobbyists, like all of this undue influence. Now, clearly foreign lobbyists, I think there is a place to be like, there are laws that need to regulate this, but everyone wants to talk about like, we need to get money out of politics. How can we, and the problem is like, we do have a First Amendment that says that we have free speech, and money is a form of, people get upset with it. Well, money's not speech. Well, why not? Like, why is it okay for me? Because maybe I can speak, maybe you're busy busting your butt. You have a successful carpentry business, right? And you're out there and you don't know how to articulate your view as much, but you're making way more money than me, working way harder than me. Why can't you say like, hey, I want to give my money to someone who's pushing my values to help get them elected? That's my speech. That's my advertisement for it. Let's say you don't directly give them the money, but you're like, I'm going to pay someone to make a commercial for that person to win. Why is that? Shouldn't that be allowed if I'm allowed to sit here and run my big fat mouth? And I saw an excellent, like Ben Shapiro when he debated Cenk Uygur at Politicon. Like, this is what Ben's saying. Like, Cenk's like, we need to get money out of politics. And Ben's like, okay, well, Buddy Roma gave you $5 million to start your company, and you advocate for specific politicians. So why is your advertisement for a particular politician not considered money in politics? Particularly because Cenk's also making the argument simultaneously that although Hillary got more corporate donations, Trump got free press time, free advertisement, which was basically a financial contribution. So if you're making that argument, then Cenk's in effect admitting that by the fact that he was basically endorsing Bernie Sanders, that he was giving monetary value to Bernie Sanders. So if we just pull money out of politics, does that still mean that the media gets to pick sides? CNN and NBC and the New York Times and all the other places are allowed to say, yeah, we're going to go with this Democrat. That's still okay. But then you might own a business and you want to say, no, I want to push for Trump, but you're not allowed to push a certain amount of money. So it's a very complicated issue. The way to me isn't to like, and there could be laws. I could be convinced. I'm willing to listen to how much money should be allowed to place or something like that. But I'm saying it starts to seem to me that it can infringe on free speech. To me, the way to solve that's not with laws, but it's with awareness to the public. And so for that, we need credible journalists, which we sadly don't have. But hopefully places like me, and I don't mean me like, oh, I'm particularly great, but I mean the idea of guy on the street could say, did you know that, our congressman took $100,000 from the pharmaceutical industry, and let people know? Then it's like, oh, all of a sudden he changed his position on the pharmaceutical industry. And it's up to us as the voters to be like, this is unacceptable, Start pushing for people. Start doing grassroots stuff to push for the people that you like. Don't leave these big businesses have all the voice. Technology is a wonderful thing. It allows us, the average person that used to not have a voice, because you had these gatekeepers in the mainstream media, it allows us to have a voice. Start pushing that. But once you start pushing for these laws and stuff, the laws, they'll always find a way to wriggle around the laws. Okay, so you're the Koch brothers, we'll just start our own media company then. But instead of CNN, we're, Koch Incorporated, our own media company. Yeah, we're just going to push Marco Rubio 24/7. That's allowed. But if they just gave money to Marco Rubio, that's not allowed. So, there's ways to get around the idea of money in politics. It's the same way with these illegal, lobbying for foreign countries. We need to hold people, yes, enforce the law. But more importantly, where are the real journalists saying, did you know that before Dianne Feinstein voted for this bill to help benefit China, that she had a Chinese spy in her camp for 10 years and that she's made X amount of dollars from Chinese that have been influencing her? Did you know that? Why don't we have the media out there doing it? And I don't care if it's a Republican or Democrat, right? That's not the point. I'm not just saying doing it to help my side, but that's what I'm going with. I am running for office. I talked about that. You can go back. I think about maybe an hour and a half in, I started talking about that. If you go back, but I'm going to be putting more videos up for running for office. I'm running for PA District 12 Congress. It's a special election that'll be coming up. So I'm going to have to head out. I really do appreciate everyone that tuned in. I know I was late today. Just real quick for the people that maybe tuned in late, because I'm running for office, you're going to start to see a lot of my videos, not necessarily my live stream, but the videos I put up that are going to be shorter, issue specific, and kind of geared towards more, this is my platform that I'm running on. So maybe looking at Second Amendment, 3-minute video, abortion, 3-minute video, things like that to try to get the word out there. And I'm going to have some new stuff coming up my channel, just little things, such as I'm going to have a logo. A good friend of mine's making a logo for me that I'll be able to have a little intro, 5-10 second intro on each of my videos. That logo, I also am hoping to put on campaign signs if I win the nomination. And in addition to that, I have a good friend of mine that's going to be working with me. Well, I say working with me. I'm not doing crap. He's going to be making me an instrumental song that's just specifically designed for my channel to be at the front end and the back end of my videos. And I have someone who's helping me work on a website just for the campaign and things like that. So there'll be changes like that coming around. So keep in touch, but I'll still be doing this videos, the live stream, topics of the day. I do a lot of videos on my friend Drone Tech's channel. So I'll be posting on my channel if I'm doing anything over there. You can check me out. And, and I'm really trying to push, as part of me running for office, to get interviewed by some people in my brother's going to come up with the slogan, to get interviewed by some bigger YouTubers or media people. So I'm going to be spending Monday and Tuesday on the phone when I'm not working with Fox News, people like Rush Limbaugh, The Blaze, Glenn Beck's channel, The Daily Wire. And I'm just literally going to be trying through writing, through email, through calls, any group I could get. I'm also going to be trying to contact Penn State University, because that's the biggest school in the district I'm running for, to see if I can get in touch with their young and Republicans to get endorsed by them. And if anyone has any idea on how to go about groups I'm going to try to get a hold of the NRA, Fraternal Order of the Police, and other groups like that to see if I can get any endorsements. So that's kind of what I got coming up. So I'm going to be really busy. I don't know if I'll be putting as much content up, but I'll still be trying to do basically a video a day, except maybe on Mondays and Tuesdays because of my work schedule. And I'll still be doing the live streams on Friday. So thank you very much, everyone. And I hope everyone has a good one. I'm going to go stir some soup and pick my wife up from work. So we'll see you.